Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the AI Experience Summit. Today is going to be the first of 3 full days of fantastic programming, phenomenal speakers, and most importantly, opportunities for us to connect around issues and topics that matter to the broader profession of business. My name is Matt Burns, and I'll be the moderator for today's first conversation entitled AI, the state of AI in work and business. And I'll be joined by a number of really talented panelists today. So I'll bring them on stage and have them join me here. Thank you, Jessa. Jason DeSense, Eduardo Ordax, Mandy McAl. It's a pleasure to see you guys today. Let's do some brief introductions and we'll get things kicked off. Mandy, want to start things off with us?
I would love to. So, hi everyone. My name is Mandy McHale. I am the Chief of Staff of People at a company called ClickUp. We are productivity software with AI as our superpowered engine, and I'm honored to be here with you.
Okay, have you, Mandy. And Jason.
Hi, my name is Jason DeSense. I am the Chief Human Resource Officer for Toshiba Americas, and I'm happy to be here as well. Thank you.
Great to have you, Jason. And last but not least, Eduardo.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for inviting me today. I'm currently leading go-to-market for Generative AI at me at AWS, and also very happy to be here with you, Mandy and Jason.
It's going to be a great conversation. I'm excited about all these diverse voices today in what is going to be a very far-reaching discussion. But let's start first with a topic that I think everyone has at least asked internally, and if not, you've been certainly asking it externally, which is adoptions, and specifically around barriers to adoption. So when we look at organizations today, what are some of the larger barriers to adoption that prevent us from truly embracing artificial intelligence? And I'll popcorn style in terms of the question.
Okay, I'm happy to start. Oh, go ahead, Eduardo, go ahead.
It used to happen all the time, right? You know, like when you're not putting the spot on someone. Well, about the challenges, I would say there are like many right now. And to be honest, the biggest challenge is not technology. I always say the same thing. We have technology from the future to solve problems about the present. So I think technology is great, but the most common challenge that I'm seeing, you know, like across customers, even if it's big enterprise, public sector, startups, and so on, it's about people. And it's about people because, you know, this technology is evolving super fast. I mean, like every single week you look into the news and you see like, you know, like new standards, new models, new frameworks, new applications based on, you know, like artificial intelligence. And the companies, they want to have people with huge amount of experience in all these technologies. And that's simply impossible because, I mean, like they have been released like a few days or even weeks or months ago, right? So I think companies, they're struggling to adopt AI because of the people, because they are not, you know, like qualified to train their own people, but they are not either, you know, like qualified to go out there to hire people because, I mean, like they are looking for profiles that they are not actually there. So I would say the biggest problem right now for most of the companies, apart from many others, but I will highlight the biggest problem right now, it's people and talent.
Jason.
Yeah, hi. My perspective on this is kind of twofold. One, being in HR for almost 30 years now, is, you know, about 15 years ago, there was a big push in HR to consolidate systems, right? We were trying to get away from having multiple systems and multiple platforms. So we spent 15 years or so consolidating, getting to a single HCM system. And now AI comes along and everyone's like, well, just bolt it on. Well, we just got rid of everything. Now we're being asked the question to put it back. And I think you're seeing a lot of hesitation from HR people like myself, even, who, are trying to do this in a very thoughtful way so that we don't go back to having 8 to 10 systems. We have strategic systems that really matter and really have an impact. And the second part of that is ROI, right? Trying to show the ROI of, AI is not cheap. So a lot of, in my opinion, we have to pick where to start. Where's the first ROI where people can see the best bang for their buck? And I've been doing a lot of tech conferences, and majority of what I'm seeing today is really around recruitment, to be honest with you.
And Mandy, I know you're passionate about efficiencies and productivity. So I love your thoughts on that conversation regarding just the proliferation of different solutions in the market and just your overall thoughts on adoption.
I do, and I'm passionate about people too, so I'll answer it twofold because I agree with both Eduardo and Jason. I think on the people side of things, I wholeheartedly agree. The barrier is not technology itself. It's actually the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of how can I actually use AI in a way that augments me, that supercharges me. And when you don't have that mindset going in where AI is the tool and you are the painter, it can very quickly become an adversarial landscape where you think, I'm going to reject AI. And we're seeing a lot of HR teams, companies, embracing that style of fear because they don't know what to expect. They don't know the risk that's going to be introduced. To Jason's point, on the system side of things, AI is powerful, but it's as powerful as you embed it, right? And so when it's used as that surface layer, it's going to solve only one specific problem. That's where you see the proliferation of tech sprawl. But when you have strategic investments where you have a truly embedded AI solution that is going to connect your context, that is going to patch problems for now, but also be able to build on problems for tomorrow, that's when you're able to achieve where people and systems can actually come together and build those solutions for the future. And in many ways, that's the ideology that we use at ClickUp. So I appreciate, Matt, that you know a little bit about ClickUp there.
And as promised, we got right into it, folks, right into the deep end of this conversation. Thank you to my panelists already for just kicking us off on a strong note. Let's go a layer deeper, because I know people listen to these programs, watch these programs because they want to get more tangible. They want to get beyond just the conceptual. So Eduardo, I'm going to maybe start with you first, if you don't mind. Would love to understand from an AWS perspective, when you think about your Gen AI strategy, how are you helping business leaders and just more broadly HR leaders separate what's possible from what's still experimental for those who are enthusiastic about kind of this pursuing this path around Gen AI?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and I'm afraid there is not like a simple answer, right? Because the reality right now is you have a lot of different levels of maturity out there, right? You have like enterprise that, because they don't have any kind of legacy, they're like very digital and so on. It's for them very easy, to adopt these technologies. And as Jason was saying before, right? For me, AI is just something that is going to enable to achieve something bigger, right? So you need to think backwards from the outcome. And this is probably, like the strategy that we are following with our customer most of the time. This is something that we call like working backwards from the customer. So which is the end goal you are trying to achieve? Which is going to be the benefit for the customer? How you are going to be able, to ensure that you are providing a good experience to the customer, and how you're going to be able to measure the success of this, right? And at the end of the day, sometimes you will need to use AI, some others is going to be traditional ML, and even many others, you can just solve the problem by using any simple technology or approach, right? So we always try to see with the customer thinking backwards and trying to identify which is the problem and how to address the problem. Something that had changed a lot within the last couple of years, and this is completely different to what it used to be in the past. I remember in the past sitting with customers trying to identify use cases, because that was one of the biggest problems. How you can use traditional ML to identify the use case. You were, able to do okay, I want to do customer segmentation, or I want to do churn prediction, or I want to do fraud detection. But because, the traditional machine learning models were very simple in that manner, it was mainly about predicting yes or not with different level of confidence. Companies that were struggling to identify use cases. I think right now it's a different thing. Right now they are coming to us saying hey, I have this list of use cases. Help me to prioritize the use cases, because as you know, like as Jason said before, the problem is to measure the ROI, right? Like, hey, which is going to be the use case that is going to impact more my business, so I can work on that. And sometimes, you know, like the simple is where, you know, like it's working better. And I know many companies, they are trying to go through the fancy stuff. So they want to release, you know, like a PR saying like, hey, we are implementing AI, we are working with agents and so on, because it's cool, because it's, you know, like it's a trending topic. But sometimes you just need to focus on the simple thing. It's like, okay, what is going to bring you like more value? So this is what we are doing at AWS. We are sitting with our customers. As I said, like technology is not a problem. It's going to be there. We are trying to identify the problem, how to address the problem, and working backwards from there. And of course, you say like we need to start experimenting, but this is also one of the biggest problem, and I call it, you know, like the false promise of AI, right? Where experimenting is super easy. You can very easily, you know, like come up with a proof of concept or an MVP, and everyone gets super excited. But running this into production is a different story. That's why, you know, like we are trying to help customers not only to experiment, but also to make sure this is going to, you know, like move eventually into production.
It's a great point. And Jason, I think it's an opportunity for us to explore a bit further your earlier comments. I'd love to understand from Toshiba's point of view. I mean, operating in a complex, global, tech-enabled environment, you know, how are you thinking about, or how are you approaching AI transformation in a way that balances scalability, but is still people first? And you're muted, Jason.
Apologies. So the reality of it is really finding the entry point, right? Where do I start? That's where every person in my seat has the challenge with, where do I start? And cost is always forefront, right? So regardless of what you think, cost is always a factor we have to consider. In doing that, and then where do I get the best ROI? My thought is the best way to help the people is, let's make sure we find the right people first for our organization and culture. That's why I'm targeting talent acquisition as a start. So it's really going to give me an ability to show, hey, look, it's going to create efficiency by actually allowing our recruiters to see all the top level candidates bubble up versus them manually going in and through the thousands of resumes we might get, it being a large corporation. We need to have a finite way to actually be more efficient while at the same time finding quality candidates. And what better way to be people focused than to always make sure I'm giving my leaders the top candidates first, no matter what. And it's not just the subjective recruiter doing it. We have objective help here giving us more of a pinpoint. And really what we're going to do is we're going to take HR and shift it to be more talent advisors and less talent administrators. So that's the shift. And that's also an ROI, right? Because that's also going to change the competencies of my team. So now I'm going to shift my team to be more of a strategic focus and business impact focus, and less on fill this out. Here's the intake form. Here's give me the top 3 questions you want me to ask the candidate. Those are very basic. We're really upscaling the HR function, which is people centric. And what better way for me to show you than to constantly give you top quality candidates?
It makes sense. And Mandy, I want to come at this question from a different perspective. At ClickUp, obviously, you guys have embedded AI into the actual application. And when we think about unifying things like tasks and calendars and communications, but you supercharge it with an AI engine, it gives your employees an opportunity to leverage it in their daily work. And it gives them an opportunity really to be more efficient, more productive. So I'm curious, for an organization that sells AI, how do you think about internal adoption of the same tools so that your employees are kind of like taking their own medicine, as it were?
That's a great question. And honestly, context is king in these situations, right? And so we're very lucky to be selling the very same platform that we ourselves operate on as a company for just about everything. And so each person at this company, regardless of their role, brings in a level of context that an engineering team alone wouldn't have, a product team alone wouldn't have. And so what that actually provides everyone is the ability to step in and apply AI and its limitations to what's going on in their specific function. So as both Jason and Eduardo were saying, the HR function is very uniquely poised to be on the cutting edge of what this might look like for talent acquisition, for what it might look like for people operations, for learning and development. But the same goes for our sellers in terms of how they craft their pitches, in terms of how they communicate with their customers, for our marketing team when they're creating images, when they're creating campaigns. It's truly adding another layer to the equation. And thus we're able to then turn it around to customers and say, this is a proven use case with proven ROI. And it actually democratizes AI in a really beautiful way. And for our company in particular, we have a channel called Ideas. It's quite literally all it's called. Anyone can go inside and throw in an idea. And it could be something like a feature optimization. It could be something like, this use case would be 10x if we were to do XYZ on top of it. And that's really how we have an acceleration in terms of having innovation, but still having our employees fulfill their critical roles and continue growing that 1% on top of what they might have done 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago.
It's interesting because the more we have conversations as an HR community, it's clear that we're both tasked with looking at this internally, but also assessing what's happening externally. And I'm always curious to hear what other people are seeing and hearing in this space because it's moving so quickly. Eduardo, when I look at senior leadership teams, we've certainly seen an evolution of thinking. I think your point earlier is well taken. Early on in this journey, there was single point solutions being brought forward. People are, advocating for department specific solutions to department specific problems. And we're increasingly seeing an awareness that AI really is the connective tissue in an organization that is best leveraged when you increase the context and leverage it cross-functionally and with partners. I'm curious about how you think about that evolution, how you think about cross department collaboration, how you think about expanding outside the very specific use cases in your department, but to bring people either on the journey from a change management perspective or potentially that along with just involving their departments to increase the utility and just the value for all involved.
Yeah, it's a good point. And actually this is something that it's changing already, especially big corporations that they are already mature working with data and AI. It's starting to change. So traditionally, what I've seen is, data and AI teams, they were, reporting to the IT team most of the times, right? And on the other side, you have the business organization. Right now, you're starting to have cross-functional teams where, data and AI teams, they are not reported directly into the IT team, but also into the business organization. Because the reality is right now, it's the business who is bringing the use cases into the table. As I said before, in the past, I remember, it was complicated to identify use cases. So most of the times it was the data and AI teams that they were, bringing different ideas to say okay, we can implement this or that, right? But now it's the other way around. It's the business teams. And actually most of the business teams, they already have people working on these specific use cases because one of the nicest things about AI is that finally it has been democratized. I remember in the past, who was working with AI? It was data engineers, AI engineers, ML engineers, data scientists. It was restricted to only these very high qualified profiles. Not anymore. I mean, right now, the entry barrier is very low. I'm not just talking about using tools like, ChatGPT or Claude. I'm talking about you can write code using different applications where maybe it's not something that is going to production, but the time that you are going to take to move from ideation into a proof of concept or a minimal viable product is going to be super short. So the thing is organizations need to change and need to adapt to the new reality. And that means, having cross-functional teams. And it's something that we have done with many customers so far, where, multidisciplinary teams, where you have in the same team, the business people, you have IT. At the end of the day, you need to have, or you need to involve IT because if we want to make this at the scale to be reliable, to be secure, you need to involve the IT teams. Something that we have seen as well, and it's very common, is okay, bring your own application from your home, right? So you are going to expose your customer data, your private data from your company into third-party applications. We cannot do that, right? Of course, maybe it's going to improve your productivity, but we need to ensure that, we are not exposing any customer data or whatever. So IT needs to be involved, data and AI teams as well, because at the end of the day, like it's not just talking to these applications. There is much more behind the scenes, right? And also business together. So like having federated teams or having this kind of cross-functional organizations, I think it's going to help a lot. Otherwise, you have like completely isolated organizations, and I don't think this is going to be something that like it's going to boost the productivity that we are trying to boost. And again, companies, and especially like in small organizations, let's think about the startups. I love startups because of that, because they don't have any legacy, right? And there, like you have the people that they are doing sales, they are doing engineering, they are doing like almost everything. I know it's managed at like very small scale. As soon as you scale, it's a different challenge. But I think you need to take some of these best practices to implement it in like big organizations, because they are going to allow them to move much faster.
No, I think you're right. I think that increased agility makes a huge opportunity, especially when you pair with the tool sets we're talking about here, where before, you're right, in the domain of deep technical experts or those who had the infrastructure to look at data science or AI engineering at a more meaningful level. Now, guys like me can start building agents and looking at building RAG models, and just the amount of solutions that are democratized is incredible. And Jason, I'd love to give you an opportunity to respond to both that, but also speak to it from the global lens. You're, again, dealing with a global organization where there's regional nuance at play here as well. I mean, there's definitely different levels of adoption worldwide. We see different perspectives around AI in terms of its, either just awareness or certainly application of it. I think about my colleagues in Latin America in particular, and how they view the world a little bit differently than those of us in perhaps North America, Western Europe. So I'm just curious, Jason, how you think about kind of just this complicated topic, considering cross-functionality, considering that global lens.
I feel like this is just history repeating itself. I can't tell you how many times in HR there was a new thing, like HR analytics was about 15 years ago, if you all remember that, and everyone just crammed to get it. Maybe I'm more calm about it, so my approach is very similar to how I approached that, which is showing the business value, looking at it from a time cost perspective. I also have an 80-20 rule with anything I implement, and I'll share that with you. I have to build something that meets the 80% of the population and deal with the 20, because otherwise I'm never going to act. So, because you could scenario plan forever on anything, let alone AI just takes it to a whole new level, right? So I would encourage us to have a plan up front, like how willing are you to push, and what's your threshold, meaning adoption. How do I know this is good for us as a culture? You have to decide that 80%, and in my opinion, in your mind, based on your business, whether it's global, whether it's local, because I could find something that's not going to meet global needs, but meets local needs, right? So it's really important to really understand what your cultural boundaries are, meaning how far you can push. What do you have the right audiences? Do you have a seat at the table to actually have influence? Because this is probably the biggest influence lift for anyone in any organization. All of us are going through it at the same time. It's never happened. IT is going through it, HR is going through it, legal is going through it, finance is going through it. We're going through it all at the same time, when usually these are microcosm things that happen in each of their own respective areas on different timeframes. So that is actually new, in my opinion, from an AI perspective. So that's why, in my opinion, one of the things that I'm doing is starting to partner across. So I go to IT, I go to finance, I go to legal and say, hey, I saw this new AI agent tool, blah, 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 and I kind of go through it. Should we all go together and actually come in as a use case as a group? I'm finding a few people I've talked to at some of these conferences, that's exactly how they're doing it. And they're actually winning. Because we always talk about FOMO, fear of missing out, but it's really FOBO, fear of being obsolete. That's the worry in AI, in my opinion. And the best way to get rid of that fear is have some other folks with you and go in together. And then together you actually will have a stronger entry point into your personal culture, because they come at it from their cultural perspectives in each respective department. So in my opinion, that's how I think AI will be effectively launched, reviewed, and kind of be successful in its implementation, is if we have more departments going in together, in my opinion.
Mark the date and time. I think we might have our first new acronym of the conference, FOBO. Thank you, Jason, for that. Fear of being obsolete. I love that. And I agree with you completely. I think it's really about getting partners with you on this journey. History is in a lot of ways repeating itself, but the speed of adoption, I think, is a bit of a uniqueness piece
That's
here.
true. Yeah.
Mandy, we talk about adoption, we talk about teams. I can't help but think as well that organizations are asking themselves, do I have the right skills? Do I have the right people on the team? And if I do, how do I help bridge the gap between where they might be now from a skills perspective and how do they
Yeah.
move into the future in a world that's dominated by AI? I'm curious about how you and ClickUp thinks about talent management and just talent in general in this new AI world.
It's a great question. I think a lot of folks default to thinking about AI as the great replacer or this genesis of replacement across the workforce, when really the way to think about it is the great augmenter. It's the augmentation of the workforce. And so, having the right people on the bus is tremendously important, but that doesn't mean you have to clean house or hire people of a very certain skill set starting right now in order to make that difference. It really starts with measuring the capability, the willingness, the skill, the will, as it were, of the people that you currently have. And so I think you do your team, your organization, your culture a disservice if you're not embedding tools or resources or enablement that give people the opportunity to not only up their skills, but show their hunger, show their curiosity, have a willingness to advance what might be their career right now. And in our case, it's ClickUp, right? But their career in the future. And so from the talent management perspective, I see it from two angles. Successful companies are embedding it within their hiring practices right now. And HR professionals tend to hear me say that and think we're adding AI to how we screen candidates or to how we screen resumes. And it's not just that, though, right? It's how do we assess AI competency? How do we assess AI willingness, AI curiosity within the interviews themselves is part of it. And then on the management side, for employees that are already here, how do you embed that into the DNA of your organization? So it might be when you have performance reviews, maybe that's one of the qualitative questions that is asked in terms of, is this person not meeting, or exceeding expectations when it comes to demonstration of AI for their specific role, or curiosity when it comes to the applications of AI? And that doesn't mean blanket jumping on from AI solution to AI solution. It does mean bringing your partners along with you, being thoughtful, making sure that risks are properly explored, but they have to be explored, right? It doesn't start with we can't do that. And I think it's the mixture of both the hiring and the management in which you'll ensure that you have the right people on the bus while still keeping your current team chugging along on the track and up leveling the company as a whole.
Eduardo, you work with some really smart people, and AI is not a new concept for many of them at AWS. They've been working on this technology for many, many years. And at the same time, we're living in a world where skills can atrophy very, very quickly, and that what got you here, in a lot of ways, won't get you there. And I'm curious how you think about workforce planning in that context, how you're thinking about keeping team skills sharp, keeping them relevant, and finding the balance between healthy experimentation individually, but also creating some harmony around some consistency so we can kind of work towards a shared goal. How are you thinking about like talent and skills and workforce planning in 2025?
Well, I think this is pretty much like, or I mean, like companies, they need to help, their people to be trained, to be upskilled and so on. But to be honest, I think that it needs to start as well by the same employee. I mean, like this is evolving super fast. That's the reality. And I can tell you, I spend like almost, like 1 or couple of hours every single day to be updated with, all the things around AI. Of course, I'm working on the field, right? So I need to be like a trust advisor. So I need to be updated with all the things that they're happening there. But this is pretty much like, like in the past that, you were using a personal computer, or you were using productivity tools like Excel or PowerPoint. I mean, like right now we are expecting employees to be updated with all different technologies. And in many ways, the companies, they are not going to be ready to, teach from scratch to every single employee on these technologies. And maybe, it's not the nicest answer here, but that's a reality. I mean, like companies needs to be aware about their business, right? About their customers. And if they are like big organizations, they cannot train from scratch every single employee. And also they need to want to be trained, because I really like this, like a FOBO mode, right? Because there is a lot of fear as well by the people saying like, hey, no, AI is going to take our job, or in the other opposite way, AI is super dumb. They are not able to do this or that, right? So, I mean, like we need to be aware about the imperfections of AI, but also about the strengths of AI. In many different aspects, AI is much better than us. So it's like, even if you take in like an LLA, or otherwise you are going to be in trouble, right? So I used to say like, okay, we need to dedicate time to be trained, to follow different courses. The companies need to help their people, how to make sure, like AI is going to be your partner to do many other things that you were not able to do today. I really like the concept about, like augment your capabilities thanks to AI. Reality is like in many cases it's going to augment your capabilities, but we also need to be honest with ourselves. I mean, like there are like many different roles right now that they are not providing any value, and they could be replaced with AI. But also there is an opportunity to a lot of new roles that they are going to be rising because of AI, right? So you need to find your opportunities. I mean, like the same that I started, or I decided to work on AI 7-8 years ago, when you're like nobody was working on this space. And I remember my friends telling me like, hey, what are you doing for living? Right now it's a different story. Everyone wants to talk to me, and like they want to know which are the latest things on the market and so on. But again, I mean, like we need to be honest with ourselves that the market is going to change dramatically, for the good, of course, but it's going to change dramatically. And unless we are not, like honest and brave, trying to take this opportunity, we are going to be in trouble. So a lot of training as well. We need to get the support from the companies. We need to take the support from, like CX levels to make sure, like people is going to be trained and so on, but needs to start from us as well. We need to dedicate time to make sure like we are able to, like to use these different technologies. I remember, and I'm finishing right now, right? But I remember a couple of years ago, everyone was talking about, okay, prompt engineer is going to be, like the role of the future. And I was saying all the time the same thing, like, hey, everyone will need to be a prompt engineer, because everyone will need to talk to different models to achieve a goal. And this is something that is happening already right now. I mean, like people is using these applications and they already know how to talk to these models. So this is something that is going to happen. I mean, like, I think like very few roles, they are going to be, like not being impacted by AI. So the sooner we realize that we need to start by ourselves, we cannot wait till, like others come to us to say like, hey, you need to be trained on AI.
I think it's a time to get honest, like you said. And I think it's an honest time for us to look at kind of where we are. And Jason, when I think about the shift that we're making, I'd love to have your thoughts more broadly on talent. You mentioned it early, the shift we need to make in talent, but also more broadly, what's a shift that we just need to make in the business profession, the HR profession, as we think about future state involving AI?
Yeah, twofold. One, I've been working on competencies with all of my teams over the last, 10 to 20 years. The reality of it is you need, at first they needed to understand how to mine data and then interpret the data. Now you've got AI to come in and help you do both a little bit, but that you still need the interpretation piece, in my opinion. So you need to train your staff, as Eduardo was saying, in my opinion, be cross-functional. Too often in HR, people, they only follow one of two tracks in HR, centers of excellence. So your training and development, your comp, your bennies. These are all the folks that create programs, or what I call in the field HR people. These are your HR business partners, generalists out there, really coaching, mentoring. And the problem is we stay on one side of the triangle our whole careers. You're now going to need to cross over both sides of that triangle and actually broaden your skill set, because AI is going to change the way we do work. So we're going to have to change the way we learn and the functions by which we operate. So it's really going to be important on that. And I still think businesses need to really put this in their goals. So we have it encouraged already in our main goals for the company for the year. We call it digital transformation. And we have a couple of subsets where we have AI, but it should be in your overarching company's goals. If they're not, then you're just in a microcosm, in a silo doing AI, and good luck getting it launched. You have to have that support, in my opinion, at the top in order for this to work at any company. So I would encourage people, if you don't already have those in your top goals, that should be a goal in your business every year from here on out until we figure out what the next thing's going to be, right? So that's my advice to everybody.
And there absolutely will be a next thing, Jason. I think our careers have at least one or two more of those trends coming for us, but AI might be the
Yeah.
big one of the moment. Mandy, as we bring things down the home stretch, this conversation has been far reaching and super insightful. I'd love to get your thoughts on, when we think about next steps, if you could leave the audience with a call to action about integrating AI into their personal practice, into their team practice, into their organizational practice, what's one insight, what's one takeaway we would leave our audience with?
I think it's start now. Start with you. Like these gentlemen have been saying, it really does come to the individual in terms of their willingness to have that mindset to embrace AI. And when we zoom out and look at it from the company level, we hear these concepts of have an AI ambassador, have an AI ambassador in each department, have someone who is leading the charge, who's influencing from north to south, east to west. But what that actually means is you have someone who sees beyond their current function and sees what it can be. So from an HR lens, some of the companies that I really enjoy following right now are adopting this mindset where you have your chief people officer, but they're also the ones on LinkedIn posting about HR use cases for AI. They're leading the dialogue about what it means to be an HR practitioner with AI. And they're seeing it beyond this is for other people to discuss. This is for the marketing team, the engineering team, the solutions team. This is for me to adopt and model and pioneer. And so I think if we can all embrace that concept, starting at the individual level, regardless of your role, you're going to be ready for whatever comes next. You're going to be able to supercharge your own skill set, but you're also going to be able to see it from a myriad of perspectives because you're opening that dialogue. You're not just having the information be presented to you, you're actually inviting it and seeing what comes next.
Great point. Eduardo, one takeaway you'd leave our audience with?
Well, sorry, Mandy, but I'm going to literally copy your words. I mean, like, you need to start right now. This is evolving super fast. And I think, like companies that are still on time, but, the time is getting smaller, and smaller. And the same that we saw like 30 years ago, like new companies rising because of the internet, companies like Amazon.com, like Google, like many others because of the boom of internet, like right now they are leading companies. I think the same is going to happen today. The same that new companies are going to rise, many others they are going to die. And that means like AI has finally arrived to a state here. We are just at the very beginning of the story. I think we are just living the very early days. We are not using AI at the scale. We are just seeing an advance of what are the things that are going to be able in the future. So the sooner you start, the more probabilities you are going to have to remain into this picture.
Two. Jason, are you gonna make it a even three here?
Yeah, sure. I'm maybe more of a cautionary person. I love that there's so much out there. I would think about it as just think about something different that's a major purchase in your personal life. Do you just run out when you buy a new car? Do you just run out to the dealer and buy the first thing you see? Of course you don't. You spend time, you research, you have certain aspects of the vehicle you want that you like, whether it's the color of the car, you want a SUV versus a sedan. That's how I know it sounds like a weird analogy, but that's how I'm approaching AI is I'm really taking my time to find out what works with my culture. It's not just a plug and play. Any AI group will tell you they have to maybe do some customization sometimes. So I think it's important for us to not be afraid to also just pause a little bit, even though act now, I don't disagree with that statement, but act the right way. Otherwise, what we're going to do is repeat the sins of the past where you launch something in three and then you're using Peter Drucker's planned abandonment rule and you're having to abandon what you just did because you realize it doesn't work. So please, any company, please spend the time to actually really be thoughtful about AI and its impact and its real ROI in your business. And honestly, the people strategy needs to follow the business strategy. A lot of HR people forget that and they get it the opposite. We still are a business. We make money. We make products. We need to remember that, and then we need to complement that with great people practices. So,
great comments from all. I think I completely agree with the group. There's a sense of urgency, so this isn't a trend that you can let pass you by. This is not like you get to skip AI. We're all going to be affected by this going forward. And Jason's comments are really well put, I thought, as well, in terms of the process of Be thoughtful. There are an infinite number of solutions now in the market that, if you give them the opportunity, will tell you that they'll solve all your world's problems. And if you pair it to the right use case, if you understand the level of maturity and adoption in your organization, if you have clear methods of measurement and the right stakeholders and the right groups internally to bring this forward, you can have a lot of success and do a lot of really great things. One of the things I love about artificial intelligence, unlike previous iterations of AI innovation, is that in this case, you truly don't have to choose between efficiency and the employee experience. You can have both, but it does require the thoughtful design and deployment of this technology in your organization to achieve both. And if we're not part of the conversation, if we think this is going to be an IT problem to fix or a finance problem to solve for, they will develop the solution for you and you may not like the design. And by that point, it might be too late to influence the outcome. Whereas if we, to Jason's point, engineer this into our practice around how the organizations run and operate, this can become a really, really powerful solution. First off, folks, thank you so much for your time today. Mandy, Eduardo, Jason, it was a real pleasure meeting with you folks. And thank you so much for your contributions. And to the group that's been watching, thank you so much for joining us in the first panel of the AI Experience Summit. As I mentioned, we have 3 full days of programming that we're looking forward to. And if you haven't already, please share this with your friends, spread the word. We really want to share knowledge that's practitioner-led, that is anchored in evidence and practicality, because we're all learning on this journey together. And it's like stories like this that we're sharing that helps all of us learn and grow at that same pace so that we can ensure that we all do this as one group. Thank you so much for your time today, folks. We'll be in touch real soon.
Thank you.
You all.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this next session. My name is Bob Goodwin. I'm the host of Career Club, and today's session is AI-driven business strategy and innovation. Today, we're exploring how AI is no longer just a tool for efficiency. It's actually reshaping entire business models, unlocking new revenue streams, and forcing leaders to rethink what competitive advantage looks like in the age of intelligence. And with that, I would love to have my esteemed panelists join us, please. Awesome. There we go. So welcome, everybody. If we could just to get everybody introduced here real quickly, and Yvette, if you wouldn't mind just starting with your name, your title, where you work, and where you're calling in from today.
Yeah, so I'm calling you from Amsterdam. My name is Yvette. I won't bother you with my last name. It's a very Dutch last name and I won't be able to pronounce it. I work for EFG, which is an online esports gaming company. And I am the VP of People Experience.
Awesome. It's so great to have you. Vanessa.
Awesome. Great to be here. I'm Vanessa Kotler. I'm the VP of People and Culture at PolicyMe. We're a digital life and health insurance company, and we're based in Canada, and that's where I am as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you, DJ.
Hi there, DJ Campbell. I serve as Chief HR Officer for Sanford Health, so located in the United States, and we are an integrated health system. So excited to be here today.
No, and not leastly, Hannah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Yardley, and I'm the Chief People and Culture Officer here at Achievers, also based out of Toronto. So we're really globalizing our conversation today. And we are a reward and recognition software.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you all. And, you know, this entire event, and I think today's session in particular, is just so on point and in focus for how businesses are thinking about AI. I wanted to start off with just a question for the group, and then we'll kind of build out from there. In your view, what does it really mean to build an AI-driven business strategy? How's that even different than a business strategy? And how do you make sure it's more than just buzzwords? Hannah, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I feel like there's a lot of pressure these days, or the things that make the news is to be AI first versus AI ready. And I think both of those things can really drive a business strategy. They're both AI-driven strategies. It's just taking a very different lens on the extent to which AI is leading the choices that you're making. You know, so lots of the stuff that gets into the market is all about being AI first. And I think it's less about having to be AI first and actually more about trying to figure out which one you want to be. And so the greatest disconnect, at least in the world that I'm seeing, is, you know, when you're trying to move from it being a buzzword to actually being part of a strategy, is to focus on the things that are within your control, within your boundaries, within your opportunities. And so that's where I think we are going to get the biggest bang here in creating AI as a business strategy, is to be able to focus on what is actually in your purview, what is the reality of what you can actually take on, and where are you going to be able to set the boundaries for what that means. And I think there's a lot of HR leaders who are holding back because they think that they're not being forward enough with their approaches to be able to create a business strategy that's really, really meaningful for them. I had a friend and an entrepreneur, her name's Larissa Holmes, amazing person. And she said on LinkedIn just a couple days ago, she said, I stopped trying to master AI and started using it to master my work. And I think that holds really well in the context of a business strategy, is stop trying to master it because it's AI. But when you actually use it to master the things that you're trying to face as a business, the challenges you're trying to face, I think that's where we're going to be able to move it from buzzword to being real.
Awesome. Yvette, how do you see this notion of having an AI-driven business strategy? What's that mean to you?
Yeah, I agree with what Hannah just said. I think there's currently so much noise, right? Where do I start? How do I jump on? What do I do? But you really need to, at this point in time, need to look at it from an enabler, and you need to see what are the business outcomes that you're trying to drive by incorporating AI within your teams. Is that speed? Is that scale? Is it personalization? And you really need to identify, okay, is it going to enhance or replace things that we currently are doing? For me, AI driven really means is that you're putting data, pattern recognition, automation at the core on how you make decisions and how you design experience and how you deliver value. The difference, the step that we need to make is that it becomes a part of your strategy. So once you start building it, you really need to look at how can it help me. So I really like what you just said, Hannah. Stop trying to master AI, but let it help me in the work that I'm currently doing, and how can I improve myself by using AI.
Very good. DJ, so part of the title here is around innovation. So, as we think about strategy and the deployment of AI, how much of this is automated or doing the things that we already know how to do, just better, faster, cheaper, versus truly changing even what we're doing? How do you see that?
When I think about, I would agree with what everybody said up to this point, and I would go back and say, do we want to be the organization that builds great AI strategies, or do we want to be the organization that just is first in line and beginning to build those strategies out? I think first and foremost, within any organization, you really need to understand AI and introduce that to your teams in a way that they can look at it, they can see it, they can feel it, they can understand it. Because I think, we really want to be on the forefront of building these programs, but our people on the backside are the ones that are going to be able to enhance it. And so I think they have to be comfortable with it. They have to trust it. They have to understand it. And I think once you build that trust and that understanding, that's when you can really truly begin to innovate. You can look at, specifics on how you can take your current business strategies and augment them with AI to make things more efficient, enhance those strategies, and just really help support your overall business strategy.
Very good. And Vanessa, how do you think about AI, business-driven strategy, and its link to innovation?
Yeah, I mean, I love all of what's already been shared. I think so much of it is I hear people say that sometimes they feel too late already, and that they're unsure what to do now, that has this passed me by. I think one of the things that I have been sharing a lot is when you're thinking about it from the broader business standpoint, don't be afraid to make a goal or a strategic pillar, figure out how we can use AI in our business, right? Make it something that is, a part of the strategy that you're setting, but it doesn't have to be use AI to do this. If you don't know what the this is yet, you can take that first step of exploration. And I loved what Hannah said about her friend's example. I recently read a book called Co-Intelligence, which talks about how we can integrate AI into our day-to-day in a number of ways, from how do we bring it into work? How do we bring it into education? And I think one of the things that is super key to remember is we are going to be the own masters of AI in our own job, right? That's true for all of us. If we think about it, we're all on our computers right now. Someone taught us at some point how to use a computer, but exactly the way in which you're using it today is pretty unique to you. And what I do every day on my computer is different than what Hannah does, different than what Yvette does, different than what you do, Bob, and different than what DJ does. But it's kind of like the same equipment, right? But we each need to figure out how it works for us. And we're only going to learn by starting to try. So when I think about it from the business standpoint, I think one of the best things that organizations can do is to clearly say, this matters. We all need to learn this. We're going to create space to learn this. You don't need to be an expert. You're not late. Now let us teach you how to use the computer, if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. And I think we're in such early days in all of this. The train has not left the station. That is for sure. I think we're just seeing a lot of people get on the train, and where its final destination is, we'll figure out. Vanessa, staying with you for just a minute. I read an article just last week in Fortune, and it talked about, this is stunning, only 7% of CEOs see their CHROs being AI savvy. And they were citing some Gartner research, some very recent Gartner research. what do you see HR executives needing to do to bridge when they're that kind of a significant perception gap?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me to read numbers like that because I think it goes back to seeing HR as, we're administrative, we're behind the curve, we're always last to do the new thing that's helpful. But I think the reality is I've actually seen HR be such a leader and a driver in AI adoption across organizations and especially in ours. So I'll give you a more practical example. Within PolicyMe, I'm actually co-leading our AI strategy with our CTO. And that was very intentionally done. When we were thinking about it, we realized so much of bringing AI into the business is learning. It's experimentation. It's a new skill that we want people to have. And what better part of the business to help people upskill, to help people learn than the HR function, right? So I think so much of it is being comfortable with the fact that this is just another thing that we're all going to learn. I think what's most important too is that we model the way ourselves. I very early started playing around, started building GPTs. And I remember when we said to our organization, we have a performance review GPT ready for you for all types of reviews. It works with different types of feedback. It's trained to our organization, to our feedback models. It's good to go. And it was pretty early on compared to where some of the things were in the market. Right now, I would say a lot of HR tech is putting AI into everything. So we're starting to get these additions within our existing tools, but this was before we had that. So I would say, don't be afraid to test as the HR team and think of it like anything else than your organization is looking to learn. That's how we bring up that type of stat, right? When people see us using the things, when people see us wanting to learn the things ourselves and looking for ways to support others in their learning journeys.
Yep, no, that's great, and for me that kind of builds to another thing that I'll just let you guys sort of jump to the ball here. But how do you make space for experimentation and innovation with AI while still, because compliance is a very big thing for HR, right? First, do no harm. So how do we leave space for innovation and being intentional, and yet at the same time kind of balancing the risk that we might be from a compliance perspective, or just sort of the humanity, the humanness of the people that we're experimenting around? DJ, I'm watching you nod your head a bit.
Yeah, I think when you think about innovation, it's really, I think about getting your people involved in that process and setting up safe spaces to begin to talk and do some experimentation around, what might be possible. When you think about the organizations that we're a part of, our frontline folks know more about the in and out operations of the day-to-day that can really take, what AI might be able to do in terms of creating efficiencies or supporting our strategies. And so I think a people first approach is really, really important. And I would just go back to the last question. It doesn't really surprise me that only 7% of CEOs think that we're AI savvy as HR practitioners. I think most people would go to the chief information officer, technology officer. But I think we can position ourselves as change agents and really help get this implemented on the people side. And that's really where our experience and our value comes. And so I believe if we want a seat at the table, we got to ask for it. We got to be able to show our value in this space. And I think things like this conference just really helps elevate that on a global scale.
Hannah, as you think about, we're talking about, on the one hand, we want to experiment. On the other hand, we need to kind of be careful with what we do. And I like what you said, DJ, creating safe spaces as an example. But are there frameworks or principles that, would guide your decision-making or what you're recommending to the organization that, balances the benefits of AI innovation with, longstanding people practices?
Yeah, I am thinking long and hard about the ethical use of AI. This idea that because we're bringing humans into the equation with technology, that we can't be blinded by the impact of what it's having, while also still balancing the things maybe that it should or shouldn't do. So I think there's lots of exploration around the things it could do, but there's a question out there about whether it should do it or not. And we often see those cases in HR a lot around bias in processes, things around performance assessments or recruitment. but I think the less talked about concern around authenticity and the ethics of AI. So a slightly different take on ethics and as a framework or a principle for guiding us in the work that we do. And I think it needs to be explored more. So certainly we see it like really prevalent in the marketing space. If you create a blog that was AI generated, should you credit the tool as your own? How authentic is that work that's out there? And at Achievers, we talk a lot about authenticity. What does it do to someone's voice, someone's opinion, someone's perspective? Does it wash the words that you think are powerful and meaningful when, for example, you're giving a recognition? And is it ethical of what you're saying in public, whether on LinkedIn or inside a platform like Achievers? Is it someone else's voice? And so there's this like really interesting debate over authenticity that I think is really underplayed. And it's one of the frameworks that we're trying to use. And what I love about it is it actually works both ways. So yes, it needs to be authentic, but really in a really fascinating way, AI can also allow people's voice to be heard when it wouldn't otherwise be heard. It allows someone to piece together pieces that they couldn't pull together themselves. It gives them confidence in order to be able to share things. And so there's this really interesting, authentic framework that we're trying to work around, in that is it meaningful or does it become authentic? But also, how is that actually loosening the restrictions on what people can do? It unlocks a whole other world for someone that they couldn't enter before, potentially. And so that's why I think frameworks in particular around ethics are a really important thing to be bringing to the table when we're thinking about the humanization of AI and technology in our day-to-day work.
Great points, and you're right. The whole ethics issue, which is a topic in and of itself, right? And I like what you were saying in terms of, kind of giving credit where credit is due, right? But also how it creates the ability to find expression, maybe in ways that you would not have been able to previously absent a tool like this. Yvette, what's your build on this? How are you thinking about some of these things?
Yeah, these are they're such good questions because it's so new. You want people to innovate, right? You want people to use it. You want people to experiment with it, because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what you can do with it. We don't know how far we can push it. We don't know how we can utilize it. But to Hannah's point, like, hey, when does it become unethical where you're presenting something as your own? And we now have AI software programs that create whole presentations, and you can literally plug and play, and you can be standing in front of your ELT and pretend that that's your thought, your thinking. So I think that there's a fine line where what I recently listened to a podcast, and I really liked what that company was doing. So what they did is they very deliberately went out to the employees and tied learning into it, same as what you're doing, Vanessa, and said, hey, we're going to teach you how to use AI. We're going to teach you how you do your best prompting. We're going to teach you how you can use it within your role, within these guidelines. And they had a whole framework around when was it okay to create an agent? When was it okay to create all sorts of things? And they would actively involve employees, because it could benefit the whole company, right? And they now have this wonderful ecosystem of all these different agents where people are looking at something that sales built that you actually use for recruitment, and vice versa. So it's a very fun and smart way to, as a company, to use the innovation, but still have those guidelines in place to go, hey, you're not using it for this, you can't use it for that, but we're going to help you because we want this type of innovation. And I think that was a very good example on how, as a company, you can embrace it. You don't want to block it. People are going to use it anyway, so you don't want to restrict it, but still, in a way, monitor it if it's being used in the right way. And I think that was a really good example of a company literally leaning into this and making sure that the ethical pieces and everything was aligned, and that people were using AI responsibly.
But let's zoom out a little bit. Going back to the title of the session with business strategy and innovation, as you think about this from an HR, workers, workplace, how work actually gets done, there's a lot of talk about hybrid work, not hybrid in the office remote, but hybrid in the human, machine type of hybrid working. And I was on the phone yesterday with somebody who was talking about AI is as bad as it's ever going to be today. It's just going to keep getting better. And so, the models, and I don't mean AI models, but the business models, the work models will continue to evolve and pretty darn quickly. How do you guys show up at your companies as business strategists, helping your leadership rethink how work even gets done in leveraging these tools?
Happy to start there, Bob. I think that when we think about the use within the business leadership component and how we're bringing it in, I mean, it's one of those things where there is no one specific right answer, I think, here. And that's so much of the discussion today, right? There isn't like the formulaic approach to this is how you bring it in, this is how you make sure it works, this is tried, true, and tested, because we don't have tried, true, and tested. So I think at this point, one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about is what is AI good at and what is AI bad at? And to just be honest about what those things are. And the reality of it is, as weird as this may sound, AI is mostly good at things that humans are also good at. So for example, when you think about being the first draft creator, think of it as your smartest intern. That's something that a human can do. But is it going to be the best at the most polished version that is ready to go without any review? No, it'll still require review. It still requires human touch. It still requires our input and our thinking. So one of the things that we've been talking about is like that smartest intern approach for how you're bringing them into your work, as opposed to the creator of the work itself or the final reviewer, right? So I think that one of the, even though I said there isn't the try, true, and tested approach, my best recommendation is always bring AI in early, use them at the beginning, and then make sure the human touch is there throughout the way, especially at the end. I think where AI gets sometimes not so good is if you're looking for it to come at the end and just fix something. That's where I think some of the authenticity issues that Hannah was talking about can come up. You give it all of your thoughts. It's like, please rewrite this to sound better. All of a sudden, it doesn't sound like you. Where it's amazing is if you say, okay, I am looking for new ways to recognize my team. And you ask it that, and it'll come up with a list of 15 ideas for you. And you don't like those, you say, can you give me 10 more? Or I'm looking for new ways to think about how we can organize our in-person events. I don't know, whatever it might be, that brainstorming partner is super effective, but that final reviewer is less so. Again, Bob, to your point, we have the worst version we're likely ever to have. So that could change over time. But I think that mindset of smart intern is super helpful for our day-to-day.
Very, yeah. I think we've all been on the receiving end of like, that wasn't exactly what I was looking for. Who else? How do you think about, in an ELT meeting, talking about how we should be rethinking about how work even gets done, what, kind of labor, technology, and, results, how they all kind of get married? DJ?
Yeah, great question. And I agree with what Vanessa has said up to this point. I think at its core, it's really about, she called it an intern. And I think that's a great reference to what it can be. You think about the ability for it to begin to shape those open drafts and begin to utilize them in a way where you're kind of getting some of that front work done that's taking less time, and you're able to finalize it and bring it to the forefront. I think really as we look at, visiting with our ELT teams, it's twofold. It's not only how we integrate, but it's how we prepare our people for whatever is going to happen next. We've talked a lot about authenticity. And so looking at what are the skills that are going to be needed of the future, on how we utilize and teach those skills. So just going back to how do you develop trust and how do you create that authenticity. We used to call those things soft skills, but really talking to our people about how do we frame up those soft skills and begin to call them power skills, because those are the skills that we're going to need to really help implement and adopt a lot of these strategies.
Hannah?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you went there, and I'm gonna do an and to that, DJ, and like we just add a one more onto there. I think we spent a lot of time talking about how it's going to help a business, what the technology capital is going to do. I love that Moderna just appointed a CHRO to see all of IT, right? This is this idea that we're like merging these spaces and people are going to need the skills to be able to do so. But I think one of the things that we forget about is we still need to keep humanizing humans. There's a lot of people out there that I think are worried. They're facing this existential crisis that they don't understand or even compute the future of their skills or where their roles are going. Engagement is an all-time low, belonging is an all-time low. And I think we need to not just focus on like the technology and business outcomes, but how we're helping people get through this. Yes, reskilling, yes, enabling them, but quite frankly, emotionally supporting them through this change is the and that I want to put on there. We know that when people feel that sense of connection, they're much more likely to stay. They're much more likely to be, to be developed. And so, if we don't continue to consider this like human side of this experience, I think all our businesses will actually lose out because we won't be able to see the business benefits. We're in a crisis of change management right now, and I think we need to remember that that's also part of this element too. It's not just the reskilling aspect of it, but helping people through this by building resiliency and understanding.
Well, if I could add to you, because I really agree with you, kind of the corollary to AI is as bad as it's ever going to be today. Today is the slowest day of the rest of our lives, right? Between the pace of change and the magnitude of change. And if I could just build on your point for a minute, Hannah, on resilience, that's exactly right. And, to the extent people feel threatened, then that's going to be a fairly significant obstacle. If we can help people understand and adopt a growth mindset, right? And so that this is going to make, jobs better, we're going to be able to fulfill our mission faster than maybe we could have before. I'm going to be able to grow into things that maybe I hadn't even envisioned a year ago, but now this is making possible. But it really is going to let humans do what humans are uniquely qualified to do. Vanessa, I love what you said. It's really good at doing what humans are already good at. But from a business strategy perspective, gosh, let's don't lose sight of, without people, there is no business. And so if the people are, freaked out over the technology, and you all are like a great group to be shepherding your organizations to being able to develop resilience, which is muscle, right? It's not just kind of recovery to being crushed and now getting back to your shape, but actually getting stronger through change management. I think it's a really brilliant insight on your part, Hannah, to talk about not just sort of the business model-y stuff, but the actual people who are executing the business strategy, and how do we not just keep them whole through this adventure, but actually stronger and more thriving than maybe they would have been previously. Yvette, how do you think about all this change management, and what are you guys are doing at your company?
No, I agree. I think again, I think what is incredibly important is that you take people along the journey, right? If I look at my own organization, obviously, like you have the usual suspects where AI can be, like, quote unquote, replacing people, which is, for instance, talent acquisition, where, immediately we saw the agents on LinkedIn doing searches and this and that, and I was getting pings from my team going like, oh my gosh, I didn't know it could do this. So it's something that you need to take people along the journey, because, and the way that I position it is like, listen, what you're teaching it is doing kind of like the boring stuff. It's the sourcing. It's the, like, that takes it a lot of time, and it gives you time back to do what you love to do, which is connecting with candidates, really going deep into questions where before, you had 30 minutes, let's go, because I have to source for the other role. So I think it is important that you position it in a way that people can see the advantage of using AI. Because for me personally, I think we're very far from it actually replacing people. If you look at within HR. But even like customer service and all that, like we're not there yet. So now is the time to really start leaning in and to go, hey, no, it's actually enhancing what you're doing. It's literally helping you with that day-to-day stuff that you don't like doing and that takes a lot of time and you want to spend your time elsewhere. And I think it's important that you shine that light on that aspect as well. And that's what we're trying to, we're setting out to do, to really help people understand where it enhances and where it replaces certain things that wasn't adding a lot of value to your role, and now you can really shine in what you're doing. Like you said, Vanessa, what you're uniquely positioned to do, like select that candidate, go deep on the questions and all those things.
Yvette, if I could just stay with you for one more minute, because you work at a gaming company that has some very interesting attributes to, whether it's user experience, instant feedback, you're constantly iterating. How are you taking some of those principles and applying them to how you guys are thinking about deploying and are deploying AI?
Yeah, 100%. So from an HR perspective, we are really looking at it from an experience point of view. How can you personalize it? As you look at market trends, you see personalization becoming a trend in all sorts of industries, right? Not just in the gaming, but in all sorts of industries. We want something tailored to us. We want to feel unique. We want to feel seen. We want to feel heard. And I think with AI, those are the things that you can actually add, because you can now tie things together that we as a human, it's impossible for us to figure all those links out and to figure out, oh, this ties into this. Now we can move you into that learning program. And especially if you have a large organization, those type of connections get lost, right? Because the message gets diluted. You're moved from one department to another department, and I think bringing in AI and really applying it to the user experience to go, hey, this person said, and I'm making this up, but this person said this in their performance review. They really want to learn yada yada yada, and you plug it immediately into your LMS. That brings you then here are all the courses that can actually enhance what you just said. And I think if you think about it that way, that's when it really starts getting a personalized user experience through an AI lens. Because as a human, it's impossible to do that, and that's how I see it being applied within. That's how we think about it.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. And Vanessa, kind of building on that, you guys are a tech forward company. Is there either a best practice that you guys have learned, or maybe something that would even be a counterintuitive learning that you guys have kind of uncovered to help upscale people, reskill people to drive further AI adoption?
Yeah, I'll maybe take a step back and share just quickly how we think about it, because I think sometimes it can be helpful just to get the framework. One of the things that we talked about is if we're thinking about an AI strategy, we need some way to categorize all of the things that are going on in the world of AI, because it's a lot. So we thought about it in 3 ways. There's the AI things we can do without any engineering support. That means any of us business humans can just go ahead and use it. There's things that are off the shelf but require some software engineers to essentially like adapt it or help it work within your business. And then there's this third bucket, which is just net new things that don't yet exist that we could create as a business, right? So new models, new ideas that could revolutionize even our company. And what we realized is that the best place to focus for this year was number 1 and number 2, right? If you get the humans in there trying and working, that's how number 3 can come up. It's really, really hard to conceptualize a whole new way that you do business based on AI if you're not even using it in a more basic way. So what we said was, for anything that's in this first bucket, so it doesn't require any engineering support, any business human can do it, we said, send us all your ideas. We just put together a quick Google form. Our CTO and I review it, and anything you want to try that's like free or cheap, we'll take a quick look. We'll make sure there's no issues with what you're looking to add in terms of information and that your use case makes sense. And then we'll say, go, we'll give you a little bit of money, go test it out. So creating this space for easy approval, easy playground for non-engineering items. And then if it requires a little bit more engineering support, okay, that escalates to our CTO. We review what else is going on with that team and figure out if it makes sense to prioritize. I think that in the context of learning, what's been really key about that is people have so many ideas for what they can do with AI, right? I'm sure you've heard them all and in your business, and it's this avalanche of it could do this, it could do that. But the whole point is moving beyond that thought to actually testing. So we've been really focusing this year on how do we get people to actually move that, take that step, like experiment your thoughts, try it out. Does it work? Does it not work? Is it harder than you thought it was? Or is it easier than you thought it was? And that's the whole thing with AI. Sometimes we don't know. This one thing that you thought was super complicated, you get in there, super easy. This one thing you thought was going to be easy, very, very hard. And that's been a huge part of how we go about learning, which is just getting people to actually test and play and try. The last piece that I'll share is we did kick off an AI Guild, which is a collaborative group across the business with representation from all departments. And then we run some sessions. So we did do a session internally on prompting, on how to get started, how to set up your ChatGPT, all of the basics from our point of view so that people feel good about it, and also spoke through security, being aware of how you're using information in there, making sure, we have a lot of sensitive information. You're not putting any of that in there. Don't use names. Don't use anything that can help identify people or clients. So just to help people feel a little bit more comfortable with a lot of the questions we kept getting a lot of.
No, I love your 3-point framework. That makes a ton of sense. It's very collaborative too, which is great. And it's kind of crawl, walk, run sort of a mindset, which is great. We just have a few minutes left. DJ, you're in the healthcare environment, which is very unique, right? Because by definition, there's a strong human element to what you do. How are you guys, building the trust, because that's critical in the healthcare environment, while at the same time pushing as fast as you can on getting AI out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll just give you a quick example because I think that will help maybe answer the question better. So we've invested in ambient listening for our physicians. So they can go into any consult room, turn on the app on their phone with the patient, and the app will actually go through, listen for keywords, and then take those notes and apply them directly to their electronic medical record. And so then the physician only has to just validate that everything is correct as they walk out. And I think that's a huge, when we talk about adoption of AI, I was looking at the chat and somebody put FOBO, fear of being obsolete. And that I'm going to use that from now on because I thought that was a great little word there. But that's really a great opportunity to not only integrate AI, but we're also creating efficiency with the physicians. They hate doing typing in notes into the electronic medical record. And so now we're automating that. They're able to see more patients. And it's a great way for us to then use that and teach our patients what we're doing. So as we think about adoption, it's not only just our employee side, but also going through and adopting on the patient side as well. So I think it's just paramount to be very transparent, be very authentic, and help look through those opportunities to bring it to the forefront.
Transparency and authenticity seem to be recurring themes here. Hannah, if you could start to bring us home here, because we have maybe just a couple of minutes left. If you could encourage the audience for one bold AI experience, or just one thing they should try this year to unlock some innovation, what would it be?
I feel like I want to take inspiration from Yvette and what she shared today in terms of like what I'm going to take out from this. And it was what you had said around these mundane tasks and like having to reframe from this is going to take your job to potentially AI being a healing tool. And stay with me for a second on the healing tool part. I think, one of the biggest things that I hear all the time is I don't like the admin in my job. I'm not being developed when I'm doing these mundane tasks. And if there's ever a moment where we can so clearly answer and solve this issue around mundane and administrative tasks without radically changing the cost model in our teams, I think this is going to be a massive healing moment for a lot of people. And so I think that reframing is something that we all need to like wrap our heads around in order to be able to think differently about this. So that's what I was inspired from this conversation.
That is awesome. Vanessa, what would you like to leave?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've said a lot of fantastic things here. It's been such a great chat. I would say just start testing, again, that it's not too late, it's early. I think we can see it in all the conversations we're having. Just get in there, start experimenting yourself, and create spaces for other people to play safely.
Yvette?
Yeah, 100% agree with Vanessa. What you're saying. I think the cut out the noise. There's a lot of noise. And just get started. Start simple. Start, fiddling yourself. Try build an agent. Do something. Cut out the noise and figure out how it can help your business, because it's going to be different for everybody. And figure out where you can place it into your organization to become more efficient, to elevate your own role, and to speed up the success of your business.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yvette. And DJ, you get to be our anchor here. Last tip or thing that you would encourage people to think about as they're driving their strategy and innovation with AI.
You bet. As I've listened to just my fellow panelists, I've taken so much from the three of you. So thank you so much. And I think as we look to as HR practitioners to adopt and integrate these, I think this type of forum where we're talking about it and, look to your mentors, look to the people you're close to, and look to people that maybe you've never thought about reaching out to and how they're integrating and how you can have those conversations. Because I think we can learn more from each other than trying to do this alone in a siloed space. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, and I want to thank you guys. It's been an awesome panel. Like the time flew by. Just a number of great concepts, ideas, practices that you guys are doing that I think people can walk away with today to be very actionable. As HR leaders, we're very, integrated into the business strategy. Without great talent, there is no innovation. And so what you all have brought, I think, to the just pragmatic, practical, and people. You're watching online and listening, thank you so much. And we'll turn it back over to our host. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our latest panel here at the AI Experience Summit. It's been a wonderful session so far. We've had some great conversations, some great insights shared, and our next panel deals with another really important topic. It is the impact of AI on jobs, skills, and more broadly, the workforce. And joining me today, we have a great panel of experts that are going to be talking about the topic from many different perspectives. We'll bring them on stage to join me. And no pressure, folks, but it's already been a fantastic start. Deb, Allison, Giovanna, it's great to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Excellent to be here. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for having us.
Let's do brief introductions, folks, before we get into the questions. Deb, would you mind starting us off?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Deb. I'm the VP of Talent Development at Muse. I've been working in the talent development space for a very long time now, and I'm very excited about the changes that are coming with AI and how that's impacting my profession and how learning and skills and jobs are changing. So I'm currently in the crux of figuring it all out. So keen to learn, from the panel and share my learning so far.
Deb, we're all trying to figure things out, so you're in good company here. Thank you so much. Allison, it was great to see you at the recent Hacking HR event in Boston. Great to see you today on the panel. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to meet you in the flesh. Matt and I actually go way back. It feels way back because it was pre-pandemic when I signed up to go through Hacking HR's Grow program many moons ago in 2019 that he was the facilitator for. But I'm Allison Morena. I am currently the VP of People at New Globe, which is an ed tech company that partners with governments in the developing world to bring technology and curriculum into public schools. So predominantly operating in sub-Saharan Africa and India.
Fascinating. That's going to be a conversation worth having. And Giovanna, yourself.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Hi, good morning. I'm based in Paris, so good afternoon for those based in Europe. My name is Giovanna, People Analytics Manager, and also work at Kering. It's a luxury retail company, so brands as Gucci, Bottega Veneta, Saint Laurent. And of course, working with everything regarding analytics, people data, and how we can make the change for HR with this new technology.
Lots of diverse perspectives, global perspectives on today's panel. So looking forward to having that conversation. I think a great place to start is just talking at things more broadly. So when we talk about the shift of AI, one of the trends we see most frequently is this trend of shifting from jobs to skills. And in particular, the introduction of AI is an invitation for us to explore different kinds of skills. Many of us weren't prompt engineers 3 years ago. A lot of us are amateur prompt engineers today. Many of us weren't thinking about the impact of big data in the way that Giovanna was thinking about big data 18 months ago. Now we're thinking about big data in terms of context and how it creates efficiencies. So let's start here. Deb, can we start with yourself just to get an understanding of how are you thinking about the shift from jobs to skills, especially as AI really upturns people in their work day to day?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question and something that we've been thinking about, at least for the last 12 months, but really starting to dig into it the last 6 months. There's the one element of it is a shift in mindset for the organization. So moving from jobs to skills or jobs to tasks, which is quite the midpoint, and then to skills requires a shift in terms of what I value. So the old kind of thinking is promotion is okay from one job to another job. That's what's going to sort of get me ahead. We need to shift that to actually what's valuable is your portfolio of skills and how do you build that. So it requires a bit of a rethink. That requires data, that requires mapping out, what are those skills, and then it requires a transparency of people having access to that and knowing how valuable those skills are and what they can do with it. So I think it's much more than just words in terms of we'll go from jobs to skills. There's a big mindset shift which requires a lot of change. I think that's one of the key elements.
I completely agree. And Allison, I'd love your perspective. Talking about sub-Saharan Africa, I know you have a lens that's global in nature. How do you attach this, or how do you think about this problem more from that global lens?
Sure. So, ultimately, it's less involved in the classroom work that we're doing. Interestingly, because a lot of the populations that New Globe serves aren't in particularly robust connected areas. A lot of our technology is hardware and involves syncing, at the start of the day with the principal of the school's mobile device, right, which may have internet access. But internally for our quote unquote corporate employee population globally, right? I think that it's important for us to think about, what are the ways that we can really think about finding efficiency, right? And augment the folks that we have. One challenge that we have is, quite frankly, we work with developing country governments. And so those aren't necessarily flush with cash. And therefore, we need to make sure that, and I know everyone and their mom is hearing this, do more with less, but we absolutely are at New Globe, right? And so with our regards to how we've been able to augment with AI, my brain really goes towards our instructional design team, right? Where historically you needed to have tons and tons of folks with a lot of copy editing experience, right? When you're looking at building that curriculum, where that is, something that AI can certainly get the ball rolling with a lot more quickly than we would have been able to historically. So I would say there, and then, with the instructional design piece outside of the copy editing too, helping to think about how can we make this lesson more applicable to this local context, right? And so kind of plugging and playing there, I think, has been a really interesting way for us to customize a lot of our curriculum and content for the learners that we serve.
Great point. And Giovanna, rounding things out from your perspective.
Yes, so I think that the way that it's affecting the workforce, so at least in the industry, so for example, retail, it's really important the time of skills. So of course, to first now to get a list of all the jobs that are can be fully automated. You have a lot of cases, especially in HR, especially in the administrative, the bureaucracy that HR that now could be automated by AI, but also how the employees were going to adapt to this change. So how it's going to do, we're going to be learning, digital learning, live learning, how also the leadership, we're going to be on board on this, so to make workforce planning, for requesting. So I think that all these three pillars are really important, especially in the industry. So to focus on the skills, how the company could be more agile with skills, but also how to be with the employees to go through this change, and also how to explain it in the leadership about how this could also add value to them, especially when it comes to HR and also those changes.
Such important points. Deb, let me ask you a very specific follow-up. I'm curious from your perspective, as a talent development leader, how are you balancing this question in terms of short-term upskilling needs with the long-term career sustainability that's necessary in this ever-evolving environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, Matt, because both things are really important. I mean, for employees, it's okay, what do I need to do my job right now? So that's like the short-term skill building. And they're also thinking, well, what does my career look like in, I don't know, even a year's time? So for us to be able to guide and support that, we need to think about, first of all, the short term. Okay, how do we start building that AI fluency? How do we start getting that AI literacy so that people can start becoming comfortable? And we need to do that like straight away. There's people who are going to run fast and they're already learning on their own, but as an organization, we need to help with that upskilling. We can't just expect them to. So there's programs that we're running, there's coaching, there's peer groups, there's a lot of things that we're doing at the moment to get people sort of on that journey. Long term, I guess that career long-term view, we're looking at internal mobility, and there's a question around it, like how much can we guarantee in terms of a long-term career in an organization? That's a question that's it's coming up. But for us, it's skills is the passport. That's the thing. Like if you're building a range of skills, that's what's going to let you, or support you to move around the organization and build that long-term career. So I think that's the link, building skills now, adding that to your passport, to your skill profile, your skill passport, which will enable that long-term career. But it's I mean, I think it's something we're all wondering right now. Like, what does my career look like 12 months out, 2 years from now? I don't know. It's a hard one.
It's hard because we just don't have the answers. And the rate of innovation and change is happening so quickly, and it's causing us to ask ourselves whether just the traditional methods even make sense.
Yeah.
I think these are all fair questions to ask, and we're not trying to denigrate on what got us to this point. There was many great programs, and I have many friends who I count among many of my good friends are talent leaders. I think about this at a day-to-day basis, and it's a challenging question.
Yeah,
and Allison, I know as well when we've talked about this, we've talked a lot about just the idea of people strategy in education, and I'm curious about how you're thinking about closing learning gaps and preparing your team for change at scale.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of going back to what Giovanna was saying, we need to think about what we can do with regards to automation. Our team has been pretty dramatically restructured, unfortunately, in the past 6 months, whilst I have been on maternity leave, and I am freshly back just as of last week, actually. And so I wouldn't say this is necessarily specific to the education industry, but something that our regional director of people, Abhishek Nag, has actually been really phenomenal at partnering with me on is making sure that those in the downline are getting, some basic skills on what prompt engineering can you input to be able to automate parts of that job, right? And so whether that be in crafting and intranet announcements, right? Actually a decent number of folks in our team, their native language isn't English, right? But that is the common language that we use throughout the company to communicate. So making sure that our announcements out to the team are, coherent and, applicable. Also making sure that when we are creating slide decks, that we are leveraging the tools to be able to create this quickly and still on brand, looking at job descriptions and making sure that we can leverage something like ChatGPT to help write them. I think that making sure that our HR teams is also really cognizant of the lack of data privacy within tools like Claude and Copilot, ChatGPT. Well, I guess Copilot, you're kind of paying for it, right? So that one's probably okay-ish. But just some of the things to be weary about and finding that right balance of where can we automate, but also protect the IP that we have, and making sure that you as the HR leaders or senior folks within your organization are training your people teams. Because a lot of times, at least in my experience, despite people not officially being IT, I've seen a lot of the AI policy and driving that is still falling on people teams. So it's important for us as people leaders and people teams to be, conversational, maybe not fluent in AI, but enough to talk the talk to be able to explain to our employees the impacts and what sort of skills they can then leverage in their own individual roles throughout the organization.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And Giovanna, I love your thoughts specifically on a question regarding just trends. I mean, you get the opportunity to look at lots of data points. You're looking at, from a, intersection of data and people strategy perspective. I'm just curious how you're thinking about using analytics to stay ahead of any of these workforce shifts or shifts in talent and skills.
Yeah, sure. So one thing is, of course, workforce planning. That is something that we use it, and forecasting. Other companies call it forecasting. It's something that we are, as a business, we are already doing it, but now with the help of AI. So it's a process that has been already, implemented. A lot of companies, especially the ones that really need technical skills, for example, to build our airplane. So someone needs to have, 4 years of experience because they really to know these actually specific skills. So there's a lot of companies with a really big tension on those kind of skills that is really important for them to have a really clear forecasting. Also other companies, because of socio-political reasons, that they need to have this clear. I think that today it's even more it's easier to do workforce planning, to do forecasting, to know how many people we have to hire, how many people with kind of skills we have to hire, because there's a lot of news because I think that was Microsoft that there was like a big layoff, and people say actually it was not a decrease. They have the same headcount. Basically, they're just like reorganizing. They're like hiring people for more this department and lay off people for this other department. So I think that the analytics from this one, it's the same one that I'm using today. So workforce planning, joiners, leavers, turnover, but with the help of HR, of AI. So that means that wanted to be faster, easier to get these insights, and hopefully more useful and to add in more value to the business.
Well, I think just the opportunity now with AI to make all of us amateur data scientists a little bit dangerous. I have to admit that, Giovanna. Well, giving me the ability to use data, always never a good idea. But that being said, just the ability to do deeper analysis that probably wouldn't have been possible unless you worked for a Fortune 5000 company where you had a big data team. It's just the opportunity for the average professional to really be thoughtful about their analytics and their insights and deploying it. It's just a huge opportunity going forward. As we shift into a different topic, I'd love to learn a bit more about performance. We talk a lot about skills and talent. I think that's a really relevant conversation. Performance is also part of the equation, though. So I'm just curious, maybe I'll start with you, Deb. When you're thinking about AI and just this proliferation in this skills economy, how are you thinking about measuring and managing performance?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, because the question is, does it change how you measure performance? So I guess if you go a bit further back or further up the line,
tools do.
Yeah, true. And I think that's the leverage, that you have more tools and you have more data points, to Giovanna's point. So you can measure to a different extent, to a different degree. Does it change what you're measuring? Probably. I mean, if jobs are changing and if different skills are required, then yes. I think it requires a bit of a rethink in terms of what are the expectations of people, like in terms of performance. Like, are we expecting the same level of performance? Are we expecting 10x? And how do we measure that? And what's the baseline? I think one of the biggest challenges that we have now is, well, what's the baseline performance, and is that accurate? Has that been accurate? And if we want to get even better at it, then so what are we actually measuring? AI can help us identify what are the key things that really make sense to measure, and how do we get those data points. So there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, I guess. It's not a clear-cut answer, but I think that's how I'd look at it.
Well, there's layers to it, right? And it's layers in terms of, yes, the tool set shift, but the methodology doesn't necessarily have to shift. Allison, I know a lot of work that you've done in the past has been working with business leaders and helping them think through the implications of change. I'm just curious how you think about coaching leaders of today and how they should think about if they're using AI in their performance practice, whether it's writing scripts or perhaps even writing feedback, how you do that in a way that balances the automation with the ethical, and how are you thinking leaders through those types of conversations?
Yeah, I think, and how you framed the question for Deb too is interesting when we think about like what we should stop measuring, right? I think a key piece there that I am unfortunately seeing a lot of right now in the market and with the companies that various family members work for is measuring productivity using AI tools. And I think that's honestly a load of BS, right? Just because somebody can jiggle their mouse to show an active Teams doesn't mean that they're driving impact for your company. And so let's cut that as a metric. As long as they are driving impact and actual results that your team is looking for, it shouldn't matter if they've done that work within, an hour versus 4 hours, right? I do think that it can be a little dangerous, right, to fully lean on AI when assessing performance. In that, anytime you go to lean on AI to fully write something for you, it can be risky because it's not necessarily conveying your tone and your voice the way as intended. It already gets tricky when you're removing the verbal tone from your voice and putting it into writing. So particularly my brain is going to performance reviews and how a lot of these performance management and development tools are, pushing AI product features. So that way you can kind of start to talk about how your employee performed during the last quarter or half year or year, however long your performance review cycle is, and essentially having it write that for you. I think that AI allows us a really great starting point for a draft, but you can't just rely on that draft. It's a rough draft. It's not your final copy. And so you need to make sure that as the leader, you're going back through, you're editing it, you're making sure that what the, artificial intelligence believes is true is in fact applicable to that individual employee's situation, because that employee isn't being managed by a robot, right? They are being managed by you as a human. And do you want to just get feedback from a robot that doesn't know the ins and outs of who you are as a person? Probably not. So I think that we as leaders need to be thinking about our teams as humans too. And so, yes, use it. Absolutely. I know that I had a lot of performance reviews to do while very quickly figuring out transition to maternity leave this past December. But also it wasn't the entire thing, right? So augmentation is the key.
So I think a couple of good points there. First off, it's only a matter of time before we all report to an AI boss. We should just accept that reality right off the bat. And jokes aside, the reality is you mentioned a few things, Allison, I think are relevant. I think people confuse productivity with activity, and measuring keystrokes and mouse movement is not an indicator of effectiveness. It's an indicator of presence. And we've all worked with colleagues that can be very productive without working the traditional 8-hour workday. And we have other people that struggle within those existing systems. And I think it's incumbent upon us to help organizations mature the definition of what productivity really means beyond just sitting at a desk and being plugged in for a certain period of time. It's about outputs. It's about outcomes. Now, additionally, you've mentioned that there's opportunities in this space. And I think, Giovanna, I'd be curious about your thoughts, because I think in addition to some of the pitfalls that we can talk about with performance management and AI, people falsifying scripts, recency bias, things like that, I think there's an opportunity as well with AI to broaden the scope of what performance means, to bring in different data streams into the conversation, when before a performance evaluation could have really just been, what does the manager remember most recently about an employee's performance? And it can be a subjective analysis that's very, very recent. Whereas now we can bring in data points and data streams and really provide more of a holistic, well-rounded view. How are you thinking about performance and data and the future of it involving AI?
No, it's a really great point. I went to a conference like a few weeks ago, and there was a CPO that was saying that normally, and I think that we all agree, a lot of promotions, it's because of visibility, because the person, is a very social person, talks with everyone, so everyone knows who is this person, and there's a lot of people who are really great at their job, but no one knows because this person is not that sociable or not visible as the other one. And I think that with AI, this is really, we can really make a difference. So now you have, for example, Copilot, and of course some new technology that can see who is doing a great job, but without telling it out loud for all the coworkers to hear about it. So I think that with now, and also with the skills that, as Deb says, the new passport is the new currency. Now is skills. So we have skills. Now we can see other ways that people are doing their work, are achieving their goals, and not necessarily without only with their manager approval, only with the manager view, with other kind of data supporting this performance. So yes, I think that is, for me, I see as a win, like performance AI, because it's going to give you more data. So you're going to have less opinion and more data to support the evolution and the productivity and the work of an employee. And for me, it would be better because my analysis would be more, even more fancy, to make a really dashboard with all the data of the performance review.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think it just brings more of that stereo, as it were, to the conversation, and just allows data to work alongside management insights, which is an important combination. Deb, one of the things we've heard a lot about just AI and its effect on skills is maybe some negative connotations around atrophy. That in a world where I can query anything from AI, where I can use it to basically create anything that I want, does the quality drop? Does the critical thinking skills drop? Do those types of things? So when you're thinking about skills and AI in a world where a lot more is possible, how are you talking about this in terms of keeping skills sharp or keeping critical thinking skills relevant in those types of areas?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it, like, and I've even experienced it in terms of there's a very inviting, I guess, word where you think, well, oh, I used to spend, I don't know, so much time with that. Like, I can just offload this, and then you start offloading a lot of things. Then you start realizing, actually, maybe I actually need to think about this a little bit more. So there's a very real danger, and I think we need to be very conscious and aware of it. And I guess in the workplace, it's the self-awareness of how we use AI, what we use it for, where it brings value, and where your cognition, your thinking and your expertise adds value to it. We need to be upfront with it. I think there's also an element of, and I've done this, calling it out. Like, this looks all AI. Where's your thinking in this? What are you bringing to this? And really valuing that and just showing that that's also valuable. But because I think the risk is very real. Of outsourcing, of skill atrophy, of all that stuff. Like, you think, okay, this seems very easy and it's a slippery slope. So I think it's on us as organizations, as professionals, to really highlight the value and where we can bring that in. Because, there's definitely that risk.
It is a risk, and I just think we need to call it out. And I also just think we need to also be realistic about, maybe that's not bad. Maybe the skills are shifting, and maybe it allows us to create space and cognitive capabilities to deploy in other areas. So I think it's really about how we replace it, if it's going to be replaced. I think
it's the balance as well, like knowing how to balance both. Yeah.
Hold two opposing thoughts simultaneously and weigh them. And again, these are not easy skills to master. So Allison, as we think about how to embed these in organizations, how are you thinking about chipping away at this for employees at all levels of the organization? We talked a lot about leaders, but we have many employees that are at the individual contributor level. How are you thinking about disseminating these types of questions and skills and conversations to that workforce?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's important to make sure that before you're thinking about the cascade, that you are on the same page as other leaders within your organization, because some of them may be more pro AI than others, right? Like, perhaps your chief legal officer may be a little bit more hesitant because of the IP concerns, right? Whereas maybe your CTO is like, let's automate everything. You want to make sure that you are first establishing a consistent AI policy for your organization before you establish how do you want to go about developing a learning plan for your broader employee population. As far as how to go about that, I think you need to take a look at some basic things outside of prompt engineering. You're going to want to also think about what are some of the roles that maybe could be better enabled by working with, large data sets and analysis here to help make their work not necessarily go faster, but maybe just be more efficient. Thinking again about how can I leverage these tools for more problem solving, and thinking about, it all goes back to that prompt engineering, right? So what sort of learning and development plan can you make for these soft skills and communication, developing the creativity behind prompt engineering, so that way they are putting the right thing in, and then also knowing how to iterate that. I have not cracked the code on that personally yet. I'm hearing a lot of interesting things out there from L&D leaders, but transparently, it's something I'm personally still working through.
And I think you're in good company as far as that's concerned. I think we're all working through it to a certain degree. Giovanna, when we talk about this question, I'm curious, when we think about skills specifically and we think about the evolution of skills, what data or indicators should organizations be thinking about to look at skills gap? Again, in that context of workforce planning, what are some of the early indicators you're looking for right now to see where you may have some risks in skills atrophy or in skills mismatches across the organization?
Yeah, so I think that first depend of the industry. So there is some industry like a more technical that is really it's easier because you can measure the skills like have Python coding, and then you have, for example, I work in retail, so it's more difficult how you can measure custom service or smiling when the client is it's entering the store. So I think that for one side, especially in the more technical skills, the analytics, the KPIs that would be more important would be, of course, now in the workforce planning. Now you have a lot of skills tools. They have already this dashboard where they show, okay, this is how many people has, I don't know, Excel skills. How do people don't know how to use Excels? And we planify this amount of joiners, this amount of leavers. We also have to include people who go into retirement because, of course, for example, there's people in my industry who is really the industrial operations. So basically, it's people with older that people are going to be in the retirement really soon. So I always have to get this in account. So I think that first will be with the leadership. Okay, what are our focus on skills? Like what are our top 5 priority on skills? I remember there like a few years ago it was cloud. So I was in a consulting company. So everyone should have cloud, and then cloud, they were like hiring clouding consultants everywhere. And now it's like AI consultants everywhere. So but things change a lot. So it's really about where are our focus skills. Then you, of course, the workforce planning, and then the KPIs. It's already embedded in any tech skill tool that you're going to choose to use it. They are also going to have already the KPIs. Microsoft, I think that was 1 month ago, they launched their Microsoft PP skills that it really changed the marketing because basically Microsoft has all the data, the Microsoft 360, that all the data, and then he's going to see how many skills that an employee. So you can use Copilot. You can ask how many people has Python, and they're going to give you the list of the people, the contact, the email of the people, everything. So I think that it's more about just set up which skills we needed, and then everything regarding KPIs, analytics, it's already embedded in those tools. And then it's our job to challenge those tools and to see if the data is really accurate, and to really get if you can improve it or not, because we have a lot of tech tools for skills right now in the market. So it's really important to understand this subject, to be really capable to challenge it, all the vendors who's going to come up with some solutions.
There are so many solutions now in the market. The biggest challenge is just sifting through them all to figure
Yeah.
out how it all makes sense. Deb, as we kind of hit the home stretch of our conversation, I really want to bring things into more of a practical tone. So I'm curious, what's one step that you think leaders should take in order to prepare their teams for the impact of AI today?
It's funny, we were having this conversation like just half an hour ago with my HR business partners in terms of there's a growing sense of overwhelm. I think there's the narrative of, oh, this is happening, it's here, we need to get on board, we're already behind. I think people are starting to feel overwhelmed in terms of, okay, what do I do? Like, how do I approach it? So there's something around the language that we use and how we frame it and the opportunities in there. So if there's one practical thing is just like, what language are leaders using to talk about this change, this new world, or these, what's needed? Is it forward-looking? Is it optimistic? Like, what is it, and what message is that sending to the workforce? I think that's one thing that you can probably use AI to help you frame your message, but it's definitely, I would say, a starting point. How are we talking about it to the organization?
Allison, would love your thoughts. One thing.
Yeah. Well, I think kind of going off of what Deb was saying, and also as a new parent, the framework and the word that's coming to mind for me is play, right? So I think creating a pretty low stakes environment for your team to not have pressure on creating something or doing something with AI, but saying like, hey, you know what? We're going to play with ChatGPT for the next 30 minutes as a team. Like, maybe keep your camera on, keep your camera off, right? If you're distributed or in the same room. And let's just see, like, this is our prompt. Like, this is the problem we're trying to solve for, and see what you're able to come up with, and try to continue with different inputs. So that way it's iterating, and make it like a mini team hackathon, right? So that way you're not putting pressure on folks to necessarily solve something outright, but I think most people are inherently curious, at least in my industry, right? In education, we're all really lifelong learners. So I'm very lucky in that sense. And so creating that low stakes environment to have, that play, I think can kind of spark some creativity for folks to want to continue to see what can they do, as opposed to saying you need to get on board or your role is going to be automated and cut, right?
Oh yeah, that kind of tone is just not going to bring a lot of change
Sure.
in most organizations. But I think it's a message that some people do hear, indirectly or directly. So I think it's an important thing to call out. Giovanna, your thoughts. One thing that you would have people take away.
So first learning, because for example, today I was open Power BI and then there was a new something in there, like, oh my gosh, I never saw this. It was a new tool that now AI can do the resume of the data. I'm like, okay, another thing that I have to learn, I have to teach to other people because things are changing every time. So I think that would be learning agility, because now you have to learn, you have to unlearn, and then you have to learn again. So I think that would be really, like, I think that the first one, and the second one is not only prompt engineer, because now you have people who use it, people who don't use it, but inside people who use it we have different levels. So you have the person who's going to make this really basic email, and you can already see, because I think that we are already receiving the same kind of emails, writing look like they were by the same person. So I think that would be the person who can make some context, who can improve it, and to use it is an advantage. So I think that the first one, learning, curiosity, and the second one, if you wanted to learn with AI, to do it well, to really make a prompt that's going to look that is really you that has written the email, but in a nice way, in a good way, in a more personal way. I think that would be those two takeouts.
I couldn't agree with you. I think we all have to learn
Yeah.
how to learn better in today's environment.
Yeah.
There's so much information. Just synthesizing those insights and bringing those into play is such a key piece. Folks, the time's already flown by. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
your
really fast.
contributions to a great conversation. It's really been fantastic. Deb, Allison, Giovanna, thank you again for your time. And thank you to our audience for checking in again. This is our important conversations that affect all of us at the individual, team, and organizational level. And it's conversations like this that allow us to have the tough conversations, bring things up, and hopefully all learn together. So thank you again, everyone. And for those of us joining, our next session is coming right around the corner. We're going to have a great conversation, the panel, Human AI Collaboration and the Augmented Workforce, in a few moments. Until then, we'll talk soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. We are here back with human AI collaboration and the augmented workforce. Another great conversation. We have no time for break, Henrik. We have to get back at it. And I'll have Henrik and my fellow panelists join us here in the conversation. Henrik and Linda, among others.
Here we go. Yeah.
Hello, Matt. Well.
Hello.
See, Henrik, we don't have time for breaks. Keep going.
Yeah. No breaks. No breaks ever.
No breaks. No rest for the wicked. First off, thank you to Henrik, to Linda, to Ha for joining me today. Great to see you all. And before we get started, let's do some brief introductions. Henrik, would you mind kicking things off with an introduction?
Sure, Matt. Happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation. So I'm leading future work for Sodexo, which means that I'm advising mostly Fortune 500 companies on the future of work, everything related to workplace experience, AI, the digital shifts, distributed work, and such.
Wonderful. And Linda.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am head of HR for Ipsos in Canada. I'm also the global co-lead of our Belonging Initiative.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Ha.
Hi, my name is Ha Cole, and I'm the Chief AI Officer for a segment of Microsoft called Tech for Social Impact. And we work exclusively with nonprofits globally. And I am responsible for Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
Wonderful. We have a global lens, and I'm blessed by 3 great leaders joining us today, which makes for a great place to jump off in terms of the conversation. I'll give this up to each of you. We'll start perhaps with Linda. I'd love your thoughts, Linda, specifically on leadership. And when we think about leadership, we think about how humans and AI blend. I'm curious how you're thinking about the blend of AI and leadership in organizations.
Right. Yeah, I know there's this fear that, AI is going to upset all of us and take all our jobs. But I think the reality is that there are things that leaders do that, to my knowledge at this point, AI still can't do. So creativity, for example, empathy, inspiration. I mean, I'm not sure that I'm going to be very inspired by a robot. Who knows? But for now, I think we need that human part. I think the key is to ensure that as leaders, we're having AI augment the work of our teams, to give us time to be more strategic, to give us time to actively listen, to give us time to be able to work on things that the business really needs to understand, as opposed to being bogged down with repetitive tasks that AI can look after. So in my opinion, leadership is something that you can't replace as of now anyways.
And Henrik, at the executive level, we're having conversations about leadership. You're, as you mentioned, consulting with large organizations. How are organizations broadly thinking about this conversation about leadership, AI, how it comes together at that senior level?
Well, yeah, it's a big question, Matt. Obviously, most of the discussions I have are on the biggest societal trends right now. There are two of them that are really persistent and important, and that's distributed work, and that companies are actually doing more with fewer resources, as Linda a bit pointed out. And that creates a new type of challenge. How do we build our operating model for the future? How can we engage people digitally? How can we enthuse our organization of learning these new technologies? And obviously, whenever all of these things happening and let's say every employee has 15, 20 different AI agents, workflow will change. We'll earn time. And I think one of the big eye-openers when I talk to leaderships out there, when I say that we actually get more human with help of AI, because you get rid of a lot of waste in time. You get faster in your resonating and you know, strategizing. All of these things you earn so much time from. So we can actually spend more time on being on the phone, face-to-face meetings, really building relationships. So I think that's the big question right now.
Well, it sounds like you're thinking about this in terms of catalyzing it for impact, which is a great segue into how your mandate, thinking about how we're talking about impact using the technology and how it can have that societal benefit. I'm curious, in the chats that you've been having, how the intersection of impact and artificial intelligence at that leadership level, how those discussions are maturing.
So for me, the leadership, lots are going to change, but lots are not going to change. And things that I don't think are changing would be leaders need to provide clarity, particularly in the space of ambiguity, uncertainty, and you see that plenty around the world impacting nonprofits. Leaders need to deliver, generate energy. And Linda touched on that earlier in terms of a human aspect to it. And leaders need to deliver results. And so when we look at the nonprofit in terms of that intersection, leaders and delivering impact from a nonprofit point of view, so long as we do both of those things, then nonprofits continue to deliver impact to the world. But it's not just about nonprofits for me, because as we go forward, our CEO Satya, he talked about we need social permission in order to do anything. We need the trust. And for me, that trust that underpins trust by employees to leaders, trust by customers to leader to partners and so on, that underpins all organizations and including nonprofits. And that social permission is part of delivering social impact to the world as well as business impact.
Well, and it's impact that we're all going to experience in some way, shape, or form. And Linda, I know you're very passionate about impact throughout the levels of the organization. We started with leadership. Let's take things down to our individual contributor level, our employee level. I'm curious about what your thoughts are when we talk about co-creation, we talk about augmentation. What's the role of the employee in all of this conversation?
I think the employee actually plays the most critical role because, sometimes when we as leaders are not embedded in the day-to-day, we might sit up in our little Eiffel Towers and decide that this is what needs to be done. But the employees are able to give us proper feedback on what actually works for the business. The prompts that really are, relatable to what they're doing, what is really going to augment their work. The ways in which it will do it. I think that they are the best in creating the prompts for, all the questions that we throw into AI, creating a prompt library, ensuring that everybody, the employees are actually empowered to help to shape the way the future is going to be in their different organizations. So I think it's critical to ensure that our employees are lockstep with us when we're trying to decide which way the organization's going from an AI perspective.
And I guess in that sense, AI isn't much different than any other digital transformation that came before, right? If we're not co-creating, it's pay me now, it's pay me later. Yep. You're going to have less resistance in the long run if you bring people with you on that journey. Henrik, at the same point, we also know that there are examples of where human AI collaboration is already happening today in organizations. This isn't a future-facing concept. It is happening now in 2025. When we think about what is happening. What are some of the examples that you think of that are having significant impact in these early stages of human AI augmentation in the workforce?
Yeah, I see it all around, but in different phases, in different types of companies, different sizes of companies, on how much this is actually, how much it has started. I would say that we are probably in the beginning of implementation of the usage of AI that really augments people, that really makes a real huge difference. I can go back to myself. A year ago, I did not work with AI. Today, I have a set of agents that really have transformed the complete way of working. I'm saving probably a couple of days a week that I spent on administration before. I can reinvest that time to really build relationships, or for some days maybe pick up the kids earlier. So it's actually a life transforming event that is happening in different phases in different companies. And I think the larger the companies, the bigger the challenge this is.
Great segue for my question for Ha, because I think I would be remiss if we didn't have a conversation about Microsoft. I mean, obviously a key voice in this conversation. And, I noticed in their recent Work Trend Index 2025 report, Ha, that Microsoft was highlighting the frontier firm and intelligence on tap. And looking at that report, which surveyed over 31,000 workers from 31 countries globally, it was clear that there were some trends that spotted it for me. And I'm curious about your thoughts on the overall findings of the report. What stood out for you as we look at this at more of the macro level?
So intelligence on tap and frontier firm, up to now, we acknowledge that if we need intelligence, we hire more people. But we are entering a stage whereby models can plan, can reason, as well as human. So let me give you an example. Just yesterday, I was talking to this nonprofit. They do research for Alzheimer's and ALS in Africa and in Asia, an 8-people organization. So we get around to, so what can AI do for us to find clinical trials for ALS in Africa? I said, I don't know. Let me work through with you. So I pull out a thing called a research agent, and we type it in on the screen, and it goes through about 20 odd steps of planning, or reasoning, or searching, or structuring the report. And it took about 5-7 minutes. And then the 3 of us were sitting there going through the screen, and you say, is that of value, etc., etc. It's the first time they've seen it, and they look at it and they thought, this thing looks like it has value. So that example for me just illustrate that intelligence is become more abundant, can be bought much more cheaply, and is available on demand, and is available in small packages that we don't have to hire a human unless there's specific reason to. And so when we have such a place with abundance of intelligence, the intelligence on tap, then lots of things would change. And so we, Microsoft, model organizations that can make use of that intelligence on tap, and we call it frontier firm. So it goes through, a frontier firm would have like 3 stages. Stage 1 is that AI acts as a digital assistant, helping us save time, better quality. Henrik just talked about that earlier. In the second stage, AI acts as a digital colleague, and it allow, under the instruction of human, we allow you to do net new things. And that example I've just shared with agent is exactly that. That organization just didn't have a researcher, high quality PhD type level to do that research for them. And then in the third stage, then AI operates whole process and whole workflow, again, under the direction of people, and it refer back to people when it needs to. So all organizations are going to go through this type of journey. The other insight that we found is that we wanted to gauge as to what kind of timeline we're talking about here. So we asked leaders, and 82% of leaders say that they're confident that they will employ agents stroke digital workforce to expand their human workforce in the next 12-18 months. Clearly, this is going to be a journey for many organizations, and not everybody would be on that for between in that length of time, but it shows the intent and the intensity of it. And that was a little bit of a surprise for us overall. So lots to unpack in the report itself. We don't have all of the answers, by the way, but the point about that report is that to provide a level of framework so that we can all think about it and we can all approach that transition to frontier firm.
Well, and it's a mirror for 31,000 professionals and sharing their thoughts. And I think it's a fascinating depiction of where the market is at. And I think it begets lots of questions. I mean, to your point, Lynn, to your point, how we don't really quite have the understanding of the specifics at the organizational level yet. It's very much taking shape. Everyone's on a journey. But undoubtedly, HR roles are going to change. And Linda, I'm thinking about our profession. I'm thinking about the role that we play in terms of talent managers, that the age-old definitions of strategic workforce planning don't really apply in a world where we have agents working along humans symbiotically, where the organizational design looks more like an ecosystem and less like a pyramid. So I'm curious, have you given any thought to HR roles and HR skills and how those are going to need to evolve in a world where there's much more of this, working alongside symbiosis of human, AI augmentation?
As HR professionals, I'm sure there are a lot on the call this morning or afternoon. Not only is our work changing incrementally, it's evolving exponentially. I remember during the pandemic, HR had to be all things to the organizations. And now here again, we stand with the future of work. We've got to figure out what the future of work is going to be. Organizations are looking at HR leaders to help them with what skilling, reskilling, upskilling needs to be done to ensure that, we can actually be on the cutting edge of whatever industry we're in. So when I think of HR, I think the biggest mindset that we have to have as HR leaders is AI is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So we can't pretend like, we're just waiting for this wave to pass. We've got to be in that mindset of continuous learning, understanding exactly what it is that the business is needing, how AI, again, can augment the tasks that we already have, ensuring that AI is doing those repetitive tasks and giving us time to be more strategic. So HR leaders, more than ever before, I know we talk about being strategic, but more than ever before now, being a strategic leader is so important from where we sit. Freeing up time to be able to ensure that our HR business partners are not bogged down with administrative duties, but instead AI can help them with administrative duties and they can do the work of actually being a business partner. For Ipsos, we are piloting an HR AI right now, which will help with things like answering questions to our employees on policies, on benefits, on HR forms, little things like that. Again, the whole purpose is freeing up time for humans to do the human things, the humanly unique qualities of actively listening, as HR, being able to hear what our people are saying, being able to support them through the fear. There's a lot of fear with employees right now. People think, hey, AI is going to take my job. How many more years do I have before I don't have a job? Supporting our employees through that. So making sure that our HR leaders and HR professionals really are using AI to complement what they actually do. I think it was Har that called it a digital assistant. Having an assistant, you don't have to pay for an extra headcount.
Well, Henrik, it sounds like you have a veritable team of 15 agents performing multiple roles. I'd love if you wouldn't mind just indulging my curiosity and unpacking a bit about the origins to go from Henrik to Henrik and a team of AI agents, and a bit about some of the use cases you've deployed those agents in to help support kind of your day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month.
Yeah, it's interesting to listen to Linda, and I can recognize many of the steps on that journey. So going from Henrik to what I am today started with taking a course with the great Dan van Rossum at FlexOS, where you can go from noob to super worker within a month. It all starts with understanding your ikigai, or kind of your purpose with your job. What do you want to spend less time on? What are you passionate about? What do you want to spend more time on? And then during that 28 days, really building that AI agent team around you. So pretty quickly, you can come up to speed with really learning what kind of usage you should have at the hands of you, because you have a specific role. So I'm a typical executive leader within the areas of strategy, transformation, these type of jobs. So naturally, I have built myself a chief strategy agent, which is a combination of Claude, ChatGPT, Notebook LM, for example, where I really am the human in the loop, using the agents as a thought partner. I think when I write to it, I think when I talk to it, and I get responses. I do strategy reports in speed I've never seen or been done before. So that's kind of the chief strategy officer agent specific part. Then I have the chief marketing officer agent, where I get help with graphical design, for example, from the likes of Midjourney or similar other AI, to really get fantastic pictures on conveying ideas, for example. So that's a few examples on how I use that. We obviously also are a Microsoft company, to Haas point. So we implement Copilot on a wider scale. But I think the interesting thing is to unleash these models, create these agents, what really works with you. So mind-blowing exercise I did the other week was to download a thick report on prompt engineering, uploaded that to my GPT, and I said, analyze all the prompts I've been doing over the last year and come up with 10 advice on how, what are my blind spots. And then I asked it to build 10 agents for me on my 10 most usual use cases with that learning. So bam, then I had a LinkedIn content agent suddenly, writing and automating that, a future work insights agent, scanning all the business media headlines daily, giving me the latest and the greatest things about future work. So, from that, we went on building a product and service developer agent that helps me in my job to come up with new ideas for making Sodexo a more relevant company, serving workplace experiences to the companies of this world. So it's this way, being in the loop, almost putting a hat on as being a strategy consulting partner, delegating tasks to these agents and really get fantastic feedback. They don't need an office space. They don't need vacation. They're just doing fantastic job. So that's the explanation, Matt. And I think what people miss sometimes is talking to AI as a thought partner, being out there on a forest walk on a Sunday evening, really talking to it for 1.5 hours, like on a really tough case that you really need to solve. Then use that chat, implement it when you come home again, and you can do source linked CSV files into Excel spreadsheets, automated graphs, and then put it into your PowerPoint agent that really just turns all the thoughts into a presentation in just a few minutes. That took a week before. Now it takes an hour. So, that's the journey.
And it's a fascinating journey. And I know this is going to be a segment that people play back and listen to, because there was so much good insight in terms of just thinking it through. And I think a couple things I just want to mention. I think, one, all this is predicated on a couple of things, Henrik. One, it's you understanding your current circumstances, and you have also a desired future state in some way, shape, or form. And you're playing a bit of a quality control, you're playing architect, you're bringing in context from different aspects of your personal and professional life to inform what good looks like. And I think that's the journey that you've built with these agents. For folks that are just beginning that journey, it might look like a more simplified model with a single agent or 2 agents, and you build and you learn and you grow from there. But I think the piece that I took away from your explanation beyond everything else was the importance of ensuring that your knowledge in a rapidly growing skill set came to pass. You mentioned a particular course that, using that. I know Hacking HR also has an internal course on building skills around artificial intelligence, learning what's possible, and applying that and pairing that with your imagination is a really powerful combination for folks. So just understanding what's possible is super, super key.
Yeah, exactly. And sorry for breaking in. Even easier, something I heard a couple of weeks ago. How can you make your job suck a little bit less with the help of this? Use your imagination, take away the boring stuff, focus on the creative stuff, or whatever makes your job better. That's how to enthuse people. And I think that's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah.
It creates more optionality and empowerment. Please.
Could I just jump in? One of the things that as observation, execs tend to know AI in the abstract, and they're not necessarily hands-on. I love the fact that, Henrik, you go and you build, because you need to see the edges of the technology in order to be able to say, it's only get to here, and therefore where is it that the human has significant value still, and that's where the augmentation works well. It's not all about AI. But I love what you are doing.
Thank you very much.
It's also the credibility that you need to be able to evangelize a solution to organizations. When you haven't put your hand behind the tools, it's just that much more challenging to actually have that conversation. So I think really, really key piece.
Yeah, and who wouldn't want to be a super worker with a set of AI agents like this? I haven't heard anyone who said no, I don't want to do that.
Linda, something you wanted to add to the conversation?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking of what Ha had said about really using AI to understand how far it goes, and how it can't replace everything you do. And as HR professionals, one of the areas is in the area of legislation. Just understanding that AI is not going to give you, not all the time is it going to give you the actual legislation. It's going to give you the best option, the best learning that it has had. If you try it and you'll see that there are limitations, and that should be a source of comfort to people who are scared that, this thing is going to take over next year and they're not going to have a job. That human aspect is necessary to really ensure that, you're not just putting in a prompt and taking out whatever it says at face value. That human aspect needs to continue to be there, especially for HR in those specific skill sets.
Which I think begets the follow-up question, I know you've thought a lot about the blend, the ratio. I know it's 2025, so it's a moment in time. But as we think about this moment, this unique moment in time, what are your thoughts around human to AI ratios? What is that blend that makes sense? What are some of the pitfalls we need to think about avoiding, or things of that nature?
Yeah. So as part of the report, we look at, I articulated the 3 stages of AI. In the stage 1, everybody really should have a digital assistant to do the save time, to save, to have better quality work products and so on. So that's fairly easy to see, I would say. When we get to the stage 2, where we say AI can do net new things for us, and then the stage 3, where we delegate for it to do fully, with human oversight, the picture is still emerging in the sense of the specific ratio is very dependent on your current capability. It's dependent on your specific process that you're talking about. So in HR, it may well be 2 agents, but in supply chain, it might be 30 agents. And we have one of these agents in Microsoft, which got 42 agents that sits underneath it. So it does vary. The key thing that we want to bring out with that human AI ratio is that it's emerging. Jump in, experiment, and then find out And because it will be largely, unique to yourself, then actually nobody have the answer right now, have a firm answer in terms of what it could be.
Well, and it's very much taking shape. And it sounds like in a lot of cases, we're encouraging the people around us to experiment. So, Henrik, for someone who's been on this journey and who's gone down the path of beginning this process, how would you recommend that organizations think about passing these skills on to their employees so that they can create their own assistant, so they can create their own self-discovered journey within that? And then once you answer that question, I loved, because the typical HR follow-up was going to be, how do we put some structure around that, Henrik? Like, how do we put some framework around that? We don't want to have AI. So, how do we, one, encourage experimentation and encourage that pull, not push, but also create some balance and some frameworks around it?
Yeah, it's a three-step question, right? If I understand that right. So let's start with the basics. The cost of inaction is the biggest cost. I think that's number one. If you're just standing still and watching, what other people do successfully or companies do, then you're missing the train, so to speak. And to your point around how to make this happen, one of the best stories right now comes from Johnson & Johnson, I think. They called their strategy "Let 1,000 Flowers Bloom." So they educated super users in AI and kind of asked the question, how can you make your job more fun? Can you save some time? And really created that curiosity. That social movement of really, did you see that thing? I tried this out with that process. That was really cool. Creating that first is the absolute number one advice I give, because if you do it the other way around from a top-down perspective and saying, hey, we have an AI strategy in the company, let's automate that process, let's go about and do it and put that project in the lab, so people not knowing or not willing to experiment with AI, it's not going to be good. So you have to do it in the right order. Start with the people on individual level, because that's where the real power is. Of course, then to your third question around structure from an HR perspective, how do you do this? One thing that I think will be happening more and more often, very short, I've seen it a few times already, is that offering software as a service as a perk. Much like that you give permission to use a gym for a certain amount of money on a month, people will start expecting to be paid to use agents and really learn that, and allowing that to happen. So choosing wisely around that is the first step of the structure. The second step of the structure, or how to implement this in a good way, is to start an open innovation program, a process that actually you go through that has an end game with all of the initiatives that you're doing. You can't just let loose and let everyone use any type of AI because that will bring significant security risks, for example. And you can't sandbox everything, because then you will not get any big value out of it. So I think that's my answer to these three questions, but pretty much summing it up with what I just said in the beginning, the cost of inaction is the biggest cost, much bigger than spending on AI for the organization.
It's a huge hidden cost, as is the hidden cost of not thinking about this in a cultural lens. So Linda, I'm curious about your thoughts as we think about integrating this culturally as well. So yes, provide the right tool sets. Yes, provide the inspiration and good examples for what success looks like. How do you think about this from a cultural perspective so that fear doesn't become the defining feature of AI in organizations?
Yeah. In that respect, I think of three areas. First of all, I think of the AI fluency that Henrik has been talking about. I think of support and then trust. From a culture perspective, I think with anything that you want to be part of your culture, you've got to start talking about it from the top down. So it just can't be an add-on, AI is something we do after we finished our work. It's embedded into our culture. What do I mean by that? In Ipsos, we've got our own in-house platform, Ipsos Facto. And every new hire, everyone that's hired has to take a certification in Gen AI, just so that coming into the organization, this is part and parcel of every day. It's not something that, just the IT people do. It's something that everybody does. So you embed it into the culture right from when you hire people. And then for those who are already in the organization, ensuring that we are continuing to train them on different things, upskilling them on the proper use of AI, of course, responsible AI. We do AI hackathons, which helps us to ensure that there's collaborations across several disciplines, making it fun. I talked earlier about supporting people who are fearful of AI, ensuring that people know that this is just, we've said it so many times here, it's just your assistant. It's something to help you do your work even better, do your work so that you can have more productivity and drive more impact. So ensuring that people are supported in that. And then lastly would be trust and transparency, ensuring that we acknowledge that AI can't do everything. It can do a lot of things, but not everything. And I think when employees in an organization understand that from the leadership, everyone's understanding that this is something that is here to augment what we're doing, it makes it easier for employees to accept that this is part and parcel of their day-to-day.
For all of us. And I want to make sure that we reinforce the importance of bringing them with us on this journey. And I think we would also be remiss if we didn't mention the golden opportunity for not-for-profits globally to really benefit from this technology. Previously, this type of computing power and analysis was just simply unavailable to the vast majority of these individuals, despite the really important and valuable work that they're doing. How are you thinking about bringing those organizations, those leaders along this journey so that they can also benefit from this massive transformation?
That's where I spend most of my time in conjunction with the rest of the TSI, the Tech for Social Impact team, obviously. So I think both Linda and Henrik touched on that, right? The first step is awareness and create the desire to learn. We have programs where, like, say, I am based in the UK, and so there's a program local in just UK to train 100,000 people, be it employees or volunteers or beneficiaries, so surrounding non-profit. And there is such a program across all of the all of the geographies. So that's number one. Number two, it is very much about, providing awareness, but also making it possible to have hands-on experience overall. And so Copilot Chat is free for customer to use, so long as they have, an enterprise set of agreement with Microsoft. Most organizations would have this already. And then beyond that, there's a lot of what we approach in terms of how we can support certain nonprofit as lighthouses to make it feel possible and achievable vision. And we go through the same kind of path that we look at. So much of my time is stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. What does that look like in the space of nonprofit? We create a lot of assets. So right now, we're working on and about to release a nonprofit agent playbook with a whole set of scenarios that all nonprofit can make use of. They are ways of enabling nonprofits overall. The last thing I do say, though, is the thing that is so unique about nonprofits is that they are very innovative because of the landscape that they operate in. And it's amazing how innovative they are. So long as we help and work with them and other partners to create such an environment, it will flow, and then it will together deliver the impact.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's a huge opportunity for not-for-profits. The constraints they've been operating in for years really puts them in good stead when it comes to understanding the use of technology, and really can be a catalyst for huge impact. So as we think about catalyzing this conversation and moving things to kind of next steps, Henrik, I'll start with you. I'd love to get everyone's perspective on what's one mindset shift that leaders need to make to embrace human AI collaboration effectively in their organizations?
Automatically, I would say that trust is not earned, it's given. So any leader out there who is skeptical about AI need to decide as well to trust the technology. Not for everything, I think, but you can't just say, if we saved a week on a deep analysis with AI and then come to a situation and saying, good, but that was AI. Now let a human do it too, to make sure that we come to the same result. That doesn't really give the effect that it can do. So I think it's about trusting the AI too, and really working with it. And that taps into being overwhelmed. I think most companies or most leaders or individuals out there are currently a bit overwhelmed too, if you started to look into what are the alternatives. So the mindset that leaders should have is to really get nitty-gritty about what their team members need from the AI perspective, and really train them to become these super workers, because they want to.
And Linda, same question.
So for me, AI is not an all or nothing. AI is your collaborator. It's not your competitor. If you use it wisely, it can help you. So having that mindset of learning, continuous learning, to ensure that you know how to use AI to collaborate with you, use AI optimally. Don't just wait, because the technology is moving at the speed of light. If you don't get into it now, you're going to be left behind. So think of AI as your collaborator and not your competitor.
Great point. And I'll give you the final word.
I'll offer something slightly different, and it's a little bit longer range. But if you think about the AI that we are using today, that's the worst that it's ever going to be, and it will improve. Linda just talked about that in slightly different words. So when we think about the world, it's so full of assumptions, all kind of assumptions about culture and how we've worked and so on. If you imagine a world where we remove some of those assumptions, we remove some of the existing constraints, then is today the first day in the history of work? How would you design it? And we see some examples from customers overall, in terms of, they flip meetings around completely, and they go into meeting to do value creation as opposed to just information exchange. You find that on the public internet. So for me, it's about removing those existing assumptions and constraint, and design the world for and design your organization. If you remove those.
Great insights for all groups. Henrik, Linda, thank you so much. Henrik, yes.
No, I was just saying that the dog said time is up.
Yeah.
That's my alarm clock is ringing too. It's great. Thank you so much for the audience. Thank you so much for our participants. Thank you so much for our panelists. And thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been a great conversation over the course of the last several hours. Up next, we have our panel on ethical AI, governance, and responsible implementation. We hope to see you there.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye now.
All right. Hey, we're coming into the home stretch, and I'm looking forward to this one. So if you're alt tabbed or anything like that, you're going to want to bring it back because this one's going to be a high octane one. So welcome to the final panel of the day. I am Christopher Lind, and I'm looking forward to hosting the topic on ethical AI governance and responsible AI, which you may go, oh, is this one going to be really exciting? But like I said, my goal is to make this the highest energy event of the day. So I'm looking forward to it. For those of you who don't know me, like I said, I'm Christopher Lind. I am an executive advisor who's spent my life at the intersection of business, technology, and human experience. If you don't know who I am, you can check out my website, christopherlind.co, or ask any of your favorite AI models. I'm friends with them all. They'll give you lots of details on me if you'd like. This is really an important topic, and I'm really looking forward to it. As a dad of 8, these topics matter a lot, not just for us, but the next generation of people who are going to live with some of the decisions we make today. So with that, I want to bring my panelists up on board. So if you can bring them up, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I hope you have the same energy I do on this topic. So let's go ahead and go around. You can each introduce yourself briefly. Let's start with you, Dawn.
Good morning. Hi, Chris. I love the energy you're bringing to this topic and super excited to be here this morning. I am Dawn Farhani. I am the VP of People and Culture at BCA, based out of Burnaby, BC in Canada. And really excited to talk about AI in a different lens, not just about how we're optimizing it, but how to have strong people practices to make sure we're using it effectively. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Awesome. Daniel, you're up.
Yeah, I've been involved in AI for about 25 years. I sold an AI company to WPP, the biggest marketing company in the world, where I am the chief AI officer, run AI across about 120,000 people. And I've just started a company to solve machine consciousness.
Okay. Wait, are you saying AI didn't just start in 2022?
No, really not.
All right. All right. Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Pradeep, let's go with you.
Hi, thanks, Christopher. I am with Capgemini. I work with a group which is all AI and data. I have been in the AI ML analytics space for a good 15 plus years, and it's exciting to see how the trajectory has changed in the last 3 years. And responsible ethical AI is definitely one of the areas that I'm deeply interested in. So looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, yeah, it's been around for a while, but it's been a wild few couple years to say the least. So Deepak.
Hey, good day, Christopher. And thank you for having me on this panel discussion. My name is Deepak, and I'm based here in Singapore. It's quite early morning for me here.
What time is it for you right now?
It's 1 a.m.
Oh, that's nothing. That's nothing.
Thank God I'm acclimatized to attending a lot of US calls, so that's good, not a problem. So I work as a CTO for the APJC region here based in Singapore for Dell Technologies. And part of my role, I do 2 things precisely. One is I represent Dell as a media spokesperson for the APJC region, which basically includes all thought leadership for our customers, partners, and analyst relationships. And internally, I focus more on driving our strategy in terms of what are the technical areas we should focus. For example, AI is one of them these days, accompanied by the data management, which everybody's figuring out, and also underpinned by the multi-cloud strategy. So these 3 areas are currently quite top of mind for a lot of my discussions and the customer interactions. Additionally, I'm also part of the internal Dell IT, which basically focuses on how we adopt AI internally, as well as an extension of the office of the CTO. So I'm quite, I would say, broad in terms of spread thin and also inch deep. That's my usual day.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about before we really get into some of the questions, I was thinking about it last night as I was preparing for this. And one of them is when people hear ethical governance, responsibility, sometimes it can kind of carry this weight of, oh, you mean slow everything down. Oh, you mean add bureaucracy to process, which sometimes can be a pushback, which I firmly believe it does not have to be that at all. I think if anything, it's sustainable. But I'm curious, as you think about, when you're talking with stakeholders and things like this, are there perceptions that you run into sometimes where you go, okay, like let's reframe this so that we can actually have an effective discussion? And again, if you haven't ever been on a panel with me, it's a discussion. So by all means, I'm curious, any of you, do you ever run into walls where you go, okay, let's reframe this to be a productive performance-based discussion instead of a, oh, okay, we're talking about slowing it down?
I can go first.
I hope that question to me, Christopher, right?
No, I said whoever's got an answer to it, I'm open to hearing from anybody what you run into, because I run into no shortage of misunderstandings, let's just say, about it.
No worries. I'll probably go first as I jumped already into it. Look, particularly when you talk to the users on adoption and ethical considerations and security and what's not, obviously from a user perspective, it looks like you're putting multiple hurdles in between.
Yeah.
But that also usually comes from two particular aspects. One is whether the user is actually part of the decision making, whether they have any influence on top of the stack which is being used, the tool which are being used. And also it comes down to particularly when it comes to AI in terms of literacy, which is there. So user needs to be part of the equation in terms of understanding how putting the guardrails is actually protecting them than anybody else. And absence of that usually creates a lot of confusion. And nobody wants to actually go and jump through the different hoops to achieve the outcome. But as far as the users understand what it means and why it has been actually put in place, that makes more sense. So usually when I land up into this issue, I actually ask organizations to create more of a broader governance as a framework and include the user as a front and center, as a human in loop kind of a discussion, and make sure that actually you put more efforts in holistic AI literacy for enablement perspective or a decision making point of view. That actually spreads things up. And this is not just with the AI. Frankly, we have seen this happening over the period of time and again with different technologies taking shape and form. The classic example is 10 years back when cloud computing was taking, I would say, nice roots. Everybody suddenly became like a cloud architect. And when developers were going through the monolith to the DevOps architecture, which basically changed the way you operate and make developers more productive, even they actually had the similar concern about we are putting so many steps in between and so many tools actually making them not so productive, and maybe they have been questioned on different aspects of automation. And developers back then actually cared about how do we check in the code faster and how do we actually get the application running, and everything in between looked like a non-productive aspect or making things slower than what DevOps would ideally do. And I think we're going back to the same phase when it comes to AI, ethics, governance, all these discussions. I'm just repeating the same thing.
This brings up a follow-up question I have for Don, but Pradeep, you were going to add something to it.
No, I think Deepak said it nicely, but to your original question, yes, when you have these conversations, ethics, responsible AI, it sounds boring. It sounds like bureaucracy. And so one of the things that you also want to do is reframe the whole reason of why you are doing it. And there are also, yesterday I was reading a paper where there are case studies where having responsible or governance frameworks has actually increased innovation. It sounds counterintuitive, but that's what it is, because the cost of not doing it is so humongous. And that's a big risk. So in large enterprises, it's a big risk question. So when you reframe that whole narrative from a lens of a risk management, I think it becomes a no-brainer. So yeah, I'll take a pause here.
No, I love that. And my follow-up question, because I think to your point, one of the things is there's just so many misunderstandings about it, and people they're a little nervous about what's happening right now. And so the idea that putting guardrails slows things down, actually, I think it's interesting you bring that up, Pradeep, that it can actually accelerate things because people start to feel more comfortable going, okay, at least I trust where we're going is a positive direction, which can actually increase adoption. And I guess my follow-up question for you, Don, related to this is, the people, I think sometimes we think AI is only a technical thing, and it's like, it's not. It's very much a people thing, because at the end of the day, there's people behind it, there's people driving it, there's people involved in the solutions. For you, Don, on the people side, how do you work to keep people involved and actually also assess, like, hey, do they actually know what's going on too? Because it's easy to assume, oh, they've got a ChatGPT subscription or we rolled out Gemini, so I'm sure they're good because they're using it. And that's unfortunately a very faulty assumption to make.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think having this down, like the strong foundation and having principles that is employee centered is important. So a few things is one, I think transparency, accountability, and being inclusive. And within that is, so you establish these guardrails, but how do we make sure that we are prioritizing fairness? How are we prioritizing privacy? And how are we really managing the biases that we know that occur within AI processes? So with that, I think I really recommend having diverse oversight. And I think this is, again, where the people part does come in. This isn't just a technology initiative. Unlike, I think, things previously, it touches every single one of us. We're all users. And having a diverse oversight, diverse group of stakeholders who are involved in the guardrails, in the ethics of the practices, really helps identify these potential biases and blind spots because you have a diverse perspective. AI is also a tool. It's not the person who should be making. Also think that human oversight and accountability, that ultimately the person using the tool, the person using the product, issuing that, there's the human center that needs to be accounted for as well.
Okay. I love that because I think this goes back to some of those areas when we think about governance and ethics and all of this, that there are certain guardrails we want to put around things to go, hey, let's not go too far with this. We might burn the whole house down. Now, on this topic of kind of the outside the box thinking, Daniel, I'm going to ping over to you on this, because when we think about some of these areas, you just brought up decision making, Don, and I think there's some of these areas that can be outside the box when people are thinking. And Daniel, you know, you're working related to like the creative side, the strategy. Where do you see some of these things needing maybe some urgent attention, or maybe where are we not focusing that we maybe should be paying a little closer attention to?
Oh, first of all, I just want to echo some of the things that have already been said, which is governance is often synonymized with bureaucracy. And the fact is that the right governance process allows you to place the right bets. Yes. What happens is that every time an emerging technology comes, 8 years ago it was cloud, now it's generative AI. People get very excited about technology and then they apply it to solving the wrong problems. So they have to think about it. And
yeah, they have a hammer and they just start looking for nails.
And what a governance process allows you to do is to make sure that you're placing the right bets, and that is often missed, and therefore being able to innovate more quickly. I would also argue that you don't just need diversity in decision making with AI. You need diversity in decision making with every decision that needs to be made within an organization. Whether it's building software, whether it's hiring somebody, it's about having the right diverse group of experts to be able to make the decision. And it's not just to do with AI. I would also controversially argue there's no such thing as AI ethics. And ethics is the study of right and wrong. And when I build AI solutions, there are three things that you really need to ask yourself. So the first is the intent appropriate? The difference between AI and human beings is that AIs don't have intent. Human beings have intent, and there are already well-established processes and structures to scrutinize intent. You don't need to have an AI ethics committee. There are already structures in process. The second two questions are safety questions. The first one is, are my algorithms explainable? If you build algorithms that are explainable, and by the way, the only difference between software and AI really is that AI is typically opaque in how it makes its decisions. If you make it explainable, then all of these words that we hear about transparency, auditability, they disappear. Making things explainable is your key problem to solve. And finally, the other question you need to ask yourself, and this is a strange one, is not what happens if my AI goes wrong. When we build systems, we often think about the failure points. We try to mitigate those failure points. You now have to think about what happens if the AI goes very right. For the first time ever, AI can overachieve its goal, and it can then cause harm elsewhere across the supply chain. I'm in the world of marketing now, and if we let AI loose to optimize marketing, there's an unconscious bias that humans have called homophily, which is we tend to like and trust people that look and sound like us. If we let AI loose in marketing, you probably end up with a world where you have you selling to you. Now, that might be great for business, but it might be enforcing bias and bigotry and social bubbles. So we have to ask ourselves, what happens if the AI goes very right?
Okay. Well, and I love what you bring. One of the things that stood out that I think is really important, and I think everybody would agree with this, is that so often we think about AI as its own thing. You mentioned that with like ethics, like, oh, the AI ethics, the AI strategy, the AI. And AI is an enabler, an accelerant to what you're doing. And so as you're thinking about it, it's about, well, what are we really trying to, like, what are the ethics that we have for the way we think about people, the way we think about process, the way, let's focus on those and then say, now within those constraints, where does AI fit? Rather than having this own disconnected thing that's like, well, now how do we manage and, you know, have all this other stuff? I think it's a really, really great call out, which gets to a really logical question next, which is, what are some of the frameworks, or how can, you know, as you look at each of your organizations, are there some different ways that you've worked to put together frameworks that thread that needle of, we recognize it has to do with the business, but now we're layering on AI on top of it, which presents, like you said, Daniel, some unique challenges that you maybe didn't have to think before. Because when you pour kerosene on a bonfire, things can get out of hand if you're not prepared for what's happening.
Well, maybe just to say that, you know, AI is now moving to agents. I'm sure that everybody's heard of agents. And I guess the reason why agents are important, particularly for this audience, is whilst at the moment most agents don't have agency, they're typically wrappers around large language models that people at some point agents will have agency, but the real power of agents are essentially having them as digital employees. And like a digital employee, like a real employee, that digital employee needs to have the intelligence, the capability to be able to do its job, but it also has to have the right guardrails and processes and structures, just like we do as real employees, to make sure they're governed. My big worry over the next 3 years is that people are going to unleash an army of essentially intoxicated graduates across their organization, essentially large language models, to do work that is not fit for purpose. And that is going to require a huge amount of governance and an oversight.
We'll probably get to that one depending on the timing, because that's one that I also share concerns with as people are rolling out agentic AI with sometimes little to no planning around it. And again, you get to the autonomous AI, we're in a different world. But from a practical steps for, like, what are some of the things you're doing in your organizations to mitigate some of this stuff? Because the risks are real. I mean, there's no denying there's some serious risks. So maybe let's start with Pradeep. I'm curious. Well, actually, Deepak, it's been a little bit since we've heard from you. Are there any just practical things that you go, hey, here's a good place for us to start with this?
Look, from a perspective of the ethical consideration, you need to actually look at what's your exactly intellectual property which you're trying to protect it against, and particularly it revolves around data. And when you're talking about Daniel's point about whether it's an agents or current architectures which are there, I would actually suggest a lot of customers, and we follow this internally, that you should have a great governance body. And I highly recommend actually having a human side of the aspect, which is typically HR, and then compliance, which is legal, and also CISOs to be part of it. So not just a technology problem, but make it more holistic. Second thing is, when we actually start on this ethical consideration, there are tons of excitement around it, but there is actually very little essence when it comes to an execution. So when we actually started our own projects internally, for example, everybody out of excitement actually came up like some 800 use cases of AI and how it can help their day-to-day life. But technically speaking, even being a company as big as Dell Technologies, even we can't actually execute all 800 use cases. We have to actually go back and shoot down many of them. And the way we did was actually sticking to our core as a business in terms of how it actually can help us do business better, or how we can actually optimize the business better. So basically, it goes back to the same things in terms of how do I make more money, save more money, or most importantly, avoid the risk. And then particularly third point, when you talk about avoiding the risk, that is actually coming down to how do we put a guardrails in terms of having the access to an intellectual property. In case of Dell, it was our data platforms. So we decided that we will actually curate the data platforms in a way that we will have a structured approach to who accesses what, similar to what Daniel's point, like even today, if you have certain people accessing certain type of data or certain tiers of data, you try to actually put certain governance, which comes back to an enterprise data management strategy. So if you look at the steps perspective, as I said, the most important aspect is have kind of a framework in place. If people are figuring out what that blueprint looks like, I would highly recommend look at what we have done for a lot of our customers. We released a framework called Dell AI Factory, I think somewhere similar time last year. And over the 1 year time, there are like thousands of customers who have implemented in their own way. So that could be one easy way of getting started. We use the same AI factory blueprint internally within Dell Technology. And on a high level, any blueprint, I would say, should have a 7 different tenets. One would be, how do you actually feed the data and curate the data to feed into the AI stack? Whether you are running agentic, whether you are running API-based access, whether you are running SLMs, LLMs, that is actually just a mechanics of actually AI, and it is very evolving space. Unfortunately, when it comes to AI, we only look at the models and directly look at the GPU. There's a lot in between. But the ethical and the risk part actually comes down to which part of that AI has access to which part of your data in the environment, and how you can actually curate it on a multiple levels. Second one is focus on use case as an outcome. This doesn't make sense to actually look at the AI and automate or replace a task worker, which is actually you're spending 50K as a business and investing $1 million into AI. So there are a lot of other considerations on ROI. That's another aspect beyond discussion. But in the middle of that, you need to have I call it as a 3S. You need to have a silicon diversity, you need to have software diversity, you need to have a services and skill set diversity. And when it comes to a people part, it's basically a skill set diversity, which needs an AI literacy of all of this. And wrap it around together will be, you need to think of a sustainability as a long-term view. There are many different reasons for doing that. One of being actually the power-hungry systems which are there. And it's breaking everything, as we know in the world about data centers. And 7th pillar is the security part. How you can actually implement something like zero trust framework as part of the architecture, because like it or not, most of these architectures when it comes to AI are actually created from ground up as a new stacks, or it will be actually created something as a parallel stack adjacent to the current enterprise systems. So it will be easier to actually start afresh with something like zero trust architecture on top of it. Again, people think this is something which is an additional burden on top of what they're going to do and making them jump through additional hoops. But it will be absolutely critical when it comes to AI stacks to actually have these guardrails in place. Because as we all know, when you put the data into AI, it's very difficult to make it forget as of now.
Yes.
So it's rather actually keep it outside and make it limited access.
Well, and you bring this up, and I think it's a really important piece. 2 things to call, especially given the audience that I know is probably watching this, who I talk to a lot of folks in the HR space who this is a bit uncomfortable territory, because it may be you're playing with data and digital transformation, which you may go, I did not get into this field to do this kind of work. And one of the things you brought up, well, the 2, one is that really identifying the use case and like, what are we really doing here? Like, what is the desired thing? Because sometimes you go, that's not even a good use of this. So let's pull that back. But I think the other one that you called on is data. And that point you brought up about the fact, once that data's in, it's really hard to like get it back out. And so if you're going to dump stuff into this and go, all right, let's make this part of our AI strategy, you got to be really careful that you've got the right data, clean data, things like that, because garbage in, garbage out. And if you just go, hey, we've got data, let's put it in here, and hopefully it'll just feed this thing good stuff. It's like, yeah, that could be a terrible strategy. But I'm curious from others, Pradeep or Dawn or Daniel, any other things when you go, practically speaking, these are just some really solid things to be thinking about when it comes to how do you actually start to establish some frameworks around this?
I think Deepak did talk about a lot of the data infrastructure stuff. So I think governance, it's a top-down commitment, and it also needs bottom-up engagement. So it cannot be a principles, it's guidelines. So it has to be baked into your organization processes. You have to figure out how, what it means for your organization. And also, it's not a one-time policy or something. It's a living, breathing framework. Like, it has to evolve. And especially in AI, it's every 3 months there's something new happening. So it has to evolve continuously. And I say, think of it as an ethical immune system. I mean, it has to be there. It has to be like continuously. In addition to what Deepak mentioned, I think there are a couple of things I would add. Obviously you have to have clear principles, policies, etc. And so you need to have a body or a council which is entitled, it has the authority to take the decisions as and when needed. So be it the initiatives, be it the risks, monitor compliance, if there's a guidance needed, etc. So I think that's something that you necessarily have to have. And one thing I think we haven't talked about is, is probably the training and awareness. I think everyone is confused at their various levels, what it means for their jobs, what it means for how it fits into the whole scheme of things. So I think that's also an important part as part of your governance framework. How do you make sure that everyone understands what it means? Everyone is upskilling to one at an organization level, and also in their roles. What does it mean to be aware of AI? I mean, where do I start? What do I learn? I mean, there's so much of information and noise out there. How do you filter that out? And having that, I think, is also very, very important.
Okay, I love that. And this may naturally toss over to you and Dawn, but just this idea that actually defining for people like, hey, here's what this looks like in your org or in your role, because it is very scary when you're hearing AI is changing everything, and you're like, I don't know what that means. And I think we often assume we know so much about work, and we really don't. And I think a lot of organizations, AI is challenging some of these assumptions, because we're starting to go, as we dig into this, we're realizing we didn't really know as much about the roles or the jobs or the things like that. Now, we're asking questions about, well, can AI do this or that? And it's like, well, we kind of got to know what it is before we start deciding, well, should AI be involved in this part or that part? So Dawn, I'm curious on the people side, that's a big piece. And there's another piece I want to touch on that you brought up, Pradeep, but I'm curious, Dawn, with that related to people, where do you play in that, and how do you keep that at the center of things?
Yeah, and I think to layer on is just how much people are using it. So I find like in an organization as diverse of ours, you have two people in the same role, one person who's using AI to automate 30-40% of maybe their tasks and their work, and then the other person who hasn't even started it. And so I think that's like something that we need to be really aware of, is that there's going to be recommendations on what's core eventually in terms of what people utilize and what's part of your jobs, part of this, the technology that you use every day in your job. But then there's the other part of super users, or people who've super automated their jobs. And how do we deal with that? So one, I think communication and transparency. So if people are optimizing technology to become more efficient, not to penalize them. So how to encourage that, how to recognize them, and then use that to actually deliver more productivity within the organization. Then around, again, like how we're using the technology to enhance the employee experience is also important. So I think using that in a framework of like, okay, how is the experience for an employee going to be unique for that individual using technology compared to other people? And then having managers equipped to have those conversations on what does it look like in how this is impacting everyone's jobs. I think we've just kind of gone live with everyone using this tool, but really haven't trained our leaders on how to manage people to use the tools yet.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And I've done a lot of work recently on trying to help actually establish, like, let's define what good looks like and where are people, because a lot of times we just go, well, we don't even really know. And this becomes exponentially more complicated. The other thing, and then Daniel, I'd love your perspective on this one though, that Pradeep, you brought up that I think is really important that you said is, this isn't a set it and forget it type thing where you go, great, we wrote our AI policy, so we'll revisit that in 6 years or whenever we need to, that it's an ongoing discussion because things are changing all the time. And I feel like I do a podcast on this every week, and every week I go, well, last week I was here, but now this week I'm actually here based on how the models have evolved, or a new capability that's come out, or what's something we weren't able to do last week, or it hallucinated way too much, or its capability wasn't strong enough, and now it is. But Daniel, I'm curious, anything else you would add to the, like, where do you get started? Like when you think about this within marketing, where were some of the areas you went, we got to draw some lines around this?
Well, I guess going back to the point I made earlier, is that it's my job to make sure that we're placing the right bets, not just for now, but for the future. And and I should say, you've already alluded to this, is that generative AI is not a panacea to solve all problems across organization. And there are other types of algorithmic families out there that solve problems across supply chains. That said, they are becoming more powerful. Again, arguably, they operate a little bit like intoxicated graduates. We are seeing that graduating now to a master's level where it can do reasoning. In the next 6 months, we're going to see them being able to do like a PhD level, so be given a complex problem, break that problem down, solve it. My prediction is that 18 months after that, we'll have a postdoc level that can do science, that can push the boundaries of knowledge. And then by the end of this decade, the prediction is that we'll have a professor in our pocket. And so again, we have to make sure that we're not building capability now that's going to be superseded in 6 months' time, but also making sure that we're applying the right technologies to solving the right problems. So going back to what Deepak said, start with the problem first and work backwards, but also skate to where the puck is going rather than skating to where the puck currently is. But that's the trajectory in terms of how I think that AI will develop. I would also argue that companies shouldn't be building capability that solve back office problems. You know, they're usually the easiest things that people apply technology to, like expenses and hiring and onboarding. I think the reality is that third-party providers, the platform providers, are going to help solve those problems. My advice to organizations is apply AI to solving problems that are going to disrupt your business, that are going to be that's going to differentiate your business. Focus on those opportunities. And I should also advise people that if you've never built software and scaled software within your organization, you're probably not going to do the same thing for AI. So be sober about your ability to actually bring and deploy and utilize these technologies.
I so love that you called that out, because there is, and I have quite a few discussions around this where it's almost kind of pulling people back, where the idea is, oh, AI is so easy now. We were using a partner to take care of this before. Now we're just going to build it all in-house. We're going back to the in-house days again, where everybody's thinking, well, we'll just build it all ourselves. We'll do it all ourselves. And like you said, all these transactional things that maybe you had somebody that was doing it and it was working well and it's what they specialized in. And you can waste a lot of time and energy, not saying you never do it, but you can waste a lot of time and energy going, let's transform the way we did this low value activity internally and spend tons of time and resources. And sometimes the right choice is not just leave it alone. Like, we've got somebody who specializes in this. Don't touch it. Like, where can we really radically transform something meaningful? And I think that's just such a great call out, because it is tempting to go, great, we've got AI in our hands. Let's do everything. Let's rebuild it all from the inside out. And you can waste a lot of time and money and things, going back to what I said before, of things you think you understand. And you're like, oh, we understand it pretty well. Now we got AI, so I think we're good. It can be a very, very dangerous assumption to make. So this next question I want to bring up, because I hear this all the time, and I'm curious y'all's take on how you navigate this. The word human in the loop comes up a lot. And I love that phrase in the sense of, like, let's remember to keep humans in the loop. And yet that can mean radically different things to radically different people. And human in the loop can also be dangerous. I have one use case in mind where I remember sitting in a conversation about a very critical business activity, and they said, it's human, we've got humans in the loop. And when I evaluated it, I went, you didn't have humans in the loop till you rubber stamp everything that AI did. Like, that's not humans in the loop. So I'm curious from this group, when you hear people talk about, or as you think about humans in the loop, how are you ensuring that you're keeping the right humans in the right loops? Not just saying, well, we got a human in the loop somewhere, so I'm sure we're good. And I'll throw that open, so whoever immediately comes to mind goes, oh, I've got a good one on that. I'd love to hear your take. Not all at once. Come on.
I can give my perspective on one aspect. I think when we talk about ethical responsibility, we talk about bias, we talk about explainability. I think one piece is often grossly missing is the accountable part. Like, when an AI will go wrong at some point in time, who is actually responsible for that? I think it often, the answers are very vague sometimes, like the vendor, the model providers, or the data was wrong. But you need to have somebody who actually takes ownership of that. I think that is oftentimes missing. And while human loop, it would mean different things for different use cases and different business workflows. But at the end of the day, if you're delegating something to AI to decide, to augment your workflow, there has to be somebody who says that, no, you know what, I am the guy who takes responsibility. I'm the one who has the authority to say yes, no, if there is a decision point where I have to. I think that's the perspective which I sometimes see is missing.
Okay. I love that you bring that up, because I think that's such a great point in saying you can't point the finger at AI and go, AI did it. So like, it's not, first of all, one, it doesn't hold up in court, but second of all, it's one of those things where at some point somebody has to say, yes, I'm the one who supported that decision. I signed off on that. I was aware of what went on. And so that, again, there's accountability behind it, because the second you lose that and people think they can just blame the agent, things can go sideways real quick. All right. Anybody else on this one? Where are you keeping, or how are you deciding where to keep the right humans in the right loops?
I guess another way. Oh, go ahead. I was just going to touch on it. We talked a little bit about diversity. So it's humans, like different teams, different people, different stakeholders at the table. I think we talked about this being living and breathing. So that needs to be ongoing, and having different people check in, having different people involved, having different perspectives is just, I think, again, a critical part of something that I think I would add.
Okay. Deepak?
Yep. So look, adding to what Pradeep and Don just said, look, particularly human in the loop is very subjective. So when you look at the AI people, I usually recommend them just taking a step back and not to actually think of something which will actually replace everything which is going on around their organization. Like earlier, your example you mentioned about, okay, let's do everything ourselves. And there's a classic meme going on the internet these days that I actually use like a no code tools, and it created like a front end, back end, entire app. It was beautiful, but none of that worked.
Yeah.
So that's actually the problem. You cannot replace the human factor as yet, at least. The other aspect to look at that is humans, particularly from a perspective of the entire process. You can actually look at them from a perspective of creating an immediate response team in terms of how and what AI does and how it operates. So basically that will be taking the acknowledgement and concern, addressing promptly, having some kind of a transparency in communication, which is sitting outside the AI tools. Particularly in our case, for example, within Dell, when we actually rolled out the AI for our code developers, which is quite a big portion of our organization, we see like a varied productivity improvement in the range of like 30 to 80%. And what we realize, actually, the lower the band of the developer, the junior the developer, more productivity. 80% is basically those junior ones, and the senior ones had like 30%. So if you look at from a perspective of how it looks like, it's not like what actually being replaced or who is actually getting more productive. You, in the age of AI, you don't need to actually replace particular tasks. You think this like a music concert, you can replace individual music, I would say, tools, or individual like a guitar or a piano. But you need a symphony master who can orchestrate all of this. So I think that is more concerning, and that's more important aspect, that the human in the loop is the subject matter expert who oversees entire operation and owns it as a process, and individually gets tasks delegated to each and every agents, which are basically AI agent or maybe a human agent, which basically make sure that the entire task is seen to the completion. And how much AI actually is taken into the loop for entire end-to-end process, that typically depends on the AI ecosystem and the tools which you're going to use. And as AI gets more mature, obviously it will get more efficient. But the human aspect will still stay, because you need to know what good looks like to achieve the better outcome for AI. And only the humans, as of now, at least know that.
Well, and Daniel, I'll ping this to you, because I have a question related to this, and then we'll get to our final question. But I think the point that you brought up there, Deepak, that's really important is, so often the conversation is, do we need this role or do we not need this role anymore from a human standpoint? And it's like, that's often the wrong question to be asking, because it's far more complicated than that. It's understanding, well, what aspects of this role might we not need to be done by a human, and what human oversight still needs to be there. So I think it's a really, especially for all the HR people in the room, it's so easy to go, well, how many of these roles do we not need anymore? And sometimes that's very much the wrong question. So Daniel, on this topic though of humans in the loop, you brought up earlier this point of, one of the dangers is, especially in marketing, is you can end up making products and trying to sell it to yourself with AI if you're not careful. So how do you, in marketing, keep the right people in the loop related to that, to make sure you're not making that mistake?
Well, first of all, it's really important to understand what is it humans are good at and what we're not good at. And there are enough books out there for people to read to learn about those things. Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman, for example, and Daniel Ariely's Predictably Irrational. There are some things that human beings think they're good at and we're not. And there are some things that we are good at that AIs are not good at. So that's the first thing, understanding that. But so when we're creating content, marketing content, historically, you have to have human beings assessing whether that content could be problematic. What's interesting about AI now is it can actually help be used to mitigate bias. So what we can do is we can build AIs that represent every corner of society. For example, we can build an AI that represents a political party or a newspaper or a minority group or some legal framework. So when we're creating content across our supply chain, historically, we had humans having to look at, and we still do, of course, but we can now have all of these different thousands of perspectives from AIs to see and check whether whether the content is problematic. So the idea of bias AI often is assumed to be bad, but you actually can bias AI enough so that it represents a perspective of a community. And so, again, it's making sure that you're using the humans at the right time and using AIs at the right time. I can give you lots of examples where we shouldn't be using humans to make certain decisions, but there are certain things outside of that decision-making that you still need human oversight.
I love that you brought that point up, because sometimes, I mean, and yes, bias gone wrong is a really bad thing, but like you said, honed and used in the right way, especially when I think of marketing, you can actually frame it to go, hey, this is an audience, this is a group, how are we actually targeting that, which can be a really good thing. Indeed. All right, final lightning round question, so you can all fight to see who goes first, but you all get your turn. So you got like 30 seconds. We talked a lot about what it is, how to do it well, but what are some of the things, you can each say one of the things that you most often see that's a critical aspect of responsible AI implementation that goes overlooked. So what is the one thing that you see in your sphere where you go, this gets missed a lot, or it's missed, but it's essential to this? So I'll open the floor, I'll close it, but who wants to go first?
I can start. I can say, coming from an HR lens, is coming in too restrictive. So HR coming in, putting in a policy that doesn't really enable the business to be able to grow, and puts too much restrictions on the policy. People are just going to go around it. So I think go in open with guardrails, not a policy, and be ready to change, because this is evolving, as we've talked about a lot today.
Love that. Love that. Don't come in being the office of no. They'll just leave you out of the conversation.
I can go next. I guess this is a boring answer, but you can hire smart people to go and build these fantastic AI solutions. But what is often overlooked is the amount of energy and cost required to support and maintain those solutions. Yes. They're not going to be supported by smart people, because they're going to bugger off if that's their job. So make sure that you have the right funding infrastructure in place to support the solutions that you build.
Love that. Love that. Think with the end in mind. All right, Pradeep.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I think companies often get caught in bias and transparency, but the real test is the answer to the question, who takes ownership when AI makes a bad call? Yep. I think if you haven't got that figured out, you have a problem. And it has to be embedded into the whole layer of accountability, be it clear escalation, human override, and some named decision makers. At the end of the day, somebody has to be responsible. I think that's one of the critical aspects, which oftentimes I see being missed.
Love that. When things go sideways, you don't want to be playing the game of hot potato of like, so whose potato was this? And everybody's throwing it back and forth. All right, Deepak, closing thoughts on what's one thing that people miss?
Look, I work with a lot of customers across the region, and one thing which I've seen in common is it's not about the money you have about buying GPUs. It's not about models which you download and how much you use it or how many use cases you have. One of the most expensive commodity in the world today is having the real life AI skill set. So I would actually suggest everyone to invest into AI literacy, and that has to be focused on the type of user and the role of the user in the organization. So typically the skill is seen as a black box. People will need to actually double click on that and create like an appropriate AI literacy plan in the organization.
Okay. I love that. I love that. Well, I will close it out by saying the biggest thing I see as a watch out is similar to what you said, Deepak, but a little deeper in terms of understanding we're handing this off to people. And we often don't understand how ready those people are to use the tech they're being handed. And there are ways that you can assess that and understand their capabilities so that when they're pressed with making a decision, when they're pressed with using it, when they're pressed with choosing where they're going to do it, do they know how to do that well, and not just because they've used an AI tool. And so I think especially for HR people, we talk a lot about understanding the skills in the organization or the capabilities. I think this one is way too important to not pay attention to right now. So thanks to each of you for joining. This was a great conversation. I probably could have had this for the rest of the afternoon. Hopefully everybody watching, listening, you took something from this, and hopefully I delivered on the promise that this would be a high octane session that would not be boring governance bureaucracy, but really a critical element of how do we land this plane well, because it's not going anywhere. So with that, thank you all for watching, listening. Panelists, thanks for joining me on here. And I hope you have a great rest of the day and enjoy the rest of the event tomorrow and the day after. With that, we'll see you all on the other side.